Release that witch eye by Ermu. Chapter 901, The Witches from Afar, Part 3. What do you want to know? Ozima said as she glanced at her. Scroll, Wendy held her hand, looking pretty worried. If what Tilly said was true, these people did not come to Neverwinter voluntarily. Their visit was instead due to internal conflict among the witches from Sleeping Island. If this problem was not properly resolved, not only would the Witch Union be involved in the mess, but would also lose the newcomers' trust. That would have defeated the whole point of getting the new witches to come here. Don't worry, Scroll raised one of her eyebrows and then turned to the witch who wanted to return to the eastern region. You miss your hometown, which means that you most likely weren't abandoned by your family. Like other refugees who fled to Sleeping Island, you were forced to leave the eastern region under the pressure of the church. Right? So what? Ozima cut in. Let me tell you about the current state of the eastern region. Ignoring the red-haired witch's provocation, Scroll replied indifferently, that area has not been fully recovered by the king ever since Garcia the Queen of Clearwater plundered Seawinshire and Valencia. The area was first devastated by the demonic plague spread by the church and was then ravaged by the army of Timothy. Farmlands in all surrounding areas are deserted, and people can't sustain themselves. Many of those people have become refugees. The witch showed a troubled look but was not willing to relent. If we don't go take a look ourselves, who knows whether you're telling the truth? 2 years ago, His Majesty Roland started to take in those refugees. Now the population of Neverwinter has exceeded 100,000, 70% of which are from other cities, with the majority of them being refugees from the eastern region and the southern territory. Scroll spoke calmly. Your family members are most likely amongst them. Can you tell me where you lived before? Name a town or a village, a specific landmark, or a local specialty. Do you plan to find her family only with those clues? She wasn't born in a big city where each street and alley has its own name and where people in the same community knew each other. Scroll did not reply to Ozima but instead gently pushed her hair behind her ear. She looked on at that which encouragingly like a teacher patiently waiting for an answer from her student in the class. My village didn't have a name. After hesitating for quite a while, the witch answered in a low voice. There were no other villages nearby, and it was very far from Valencia, so far that if you want to sell wheat, you would have to sell them to a merchant traveling there at a meager price. This isn't official, but some people call the village 16. 16? Wendy echoed involuntarily. Because when they returned from Valencia, it's the 16th village that they would pass by. Scroll closed her eyes and asked slowly, let me see. There's a branch of San Juan River winding behind that village, right? There are numerous branches of San Juan River in the eastern region. Ozima grunted. How can a village survive without a river to irrigate their farmlands? But that branch is different. Scroll waved her hand. It isn't wide nor deep enough for boats to pass, and even the riverbed would show in a dry season. That's why the villages nearby can't transport food and supplies by ship. But the branch converges into a huge lake at the 16th village, which will never dry up even if the river water dried up. Because of this, the wheat in the village always grows better than those in others. Am I right? The witch's eyes were wide open. Have you been there? I heard from somebody else, Scroll answered after a short silence. The one who told me this is currently in Neverwinter, but he wasn't a resident of the 16th village. What do you mean? You should ask him yourself. Scroll turned to the city hall clerk responsible for the registration. Bring what here? His ID number is 002-4578, and he's a furnace worker. He should be recycling slags in Zone 2 at the North Slope right now. Yes, Miss Scroll. The clerk left to carry out her order. Half an hour later, the clerk and a ruddy man showed up in the residential area. I don't know him. The witch studied him and shook her head, denying their acquaintance. What else do you have to say now? Ozima sneered. There are so many people in the whole eastern region. How can you just randomly pick one? Are you Tillen's daughter? The big man blurted out in excitement, paying no heed to Ozima. Thank God, you're still alive and have grown into a big girl. The witch was stunned. The Tilon you're talking about. Is she my mother? Who else could I be talking about? You've got her eyes. Especially for the mole underneath the corner of your eye, it's identical to your mother's. What cried? But you're much prettier than your mother. Hold on, you don't remember me? Well, not that it's your fault. You were just a little girl when I left the village. When I returned, you weren't there anymore. She called you Little Orchid back then, right? Tilon loved to call you names after beautiful flowers. That was just a nickname when I was little, the witch was embarrassed. My name is now Doris. I see. Well, that's a nice name, too. You know, when I dug trenches in the 16th village, people talked a lot about you. They all thought witches had abducted you, and as what rambled on, Wendy started to figure out what had happened gradually. The big ruddy man had been a resident of a neighboring village next to the 16th village. Based on the naming rule, his village should be called the 15th village. As the two villages were geographically close to each other, he had kept in touch with his neighbors. As he envied his neighbors for their water source, he had traveled to Valencia to learn trench digging. After he learned the skills, Wood had returned to his village and encouraged some villagers to help him expand the lake toward the 15th village. He had thus lived in the 16th village for quite a long time because of this project. Are my parents and elder brother still living in the village? What had apparently convinced Doris. After what finally finished, she asked hastily, or they've come to the western region with you? At this moment, Scroll let out a short sigh. The sparks in the ruddy man's eyes seemed to fade out at that instant. He replied in a sorrowful tone, they didn't make it. The second prince's army robbed our food stock. By the time we got to the king's city, starving and thirsty, a huge plague broke out. The nobles in the city shut us out, leaving us crying for help at the foot of the city wall. A large number of villagers from the nearby lands had died due to the nobles' selfishness. By the time His Majesty's rescue teams arrived, there were just a few that were still alive. He paused for a second and said, your family members weren't among them. No, Doris cupped her hand over her mouth. She stood transfixed for a moment before she started to sob uncontrollably. I'm sorry, child. Wood instantly panicked. He wanted to comfort her but did not know what to do. In the end, he came up to the girl and patted her on the head. Tilon called your name over and over again before she passed away. If she knew you were still alive and well, she would definitely be happy. So, don't cry anymore, girl. Doris bit her lips fiercely and nodded slightly but cried even harder after that. Chapter 902, An Ominous Sign. Upset with the sudden change in the situation, Ozima looked to the side and stopped talking. The crowd was silent as Doris wept and wept. After Doris had finally calmed down, Scroll spoke up again. I believe many of you are just like her. You've constantly been on the run and never had the chance to contact your families. Even if you found an opportunity to return, you would only find a hometown in ruins. This is why we want you to provide your personal information to the City Hall. With this information, we'll be able to send each one of you the latest news about your hometown once any of your fellow townsmen come to Neverwinter. Among those people may even be your relative. Besides, City Hall has already sent staff to gather the refugees from all around Grey Castle and to bring them back to Neverwinter. It'll be a long process, but eventually, the news will spread and more refugees will come to Neverwinter. It'll be easier for you to obtain information about your families if you stay here. Of course, if needed, the staff can concentrate their search on the areas around your hometowns. His Majesty is fully capable of doing that. Are you serious? Ozima looked up and stared at Scroll. Are the big shots in the palace willing to help us find our families? If your big shots refers to City Hall officials, I'm also one of the big shots, Scroll said with her hands laid out. We run the city with a completely different system compared to the nobles. As long as you can pass the exam, even a witch can get involved in the administration and become an official of the kingdom. These words stirred up a commotion in the crowd. As for the question you asked, the answer is yes. Scroll then continued with her explanation. Neverwinter never intended to stop you from leaving here, nor would we want to limit your freedom. But I do have to warn you against leaving Neverwinter right now. The war rages on and famine ravages the country. Numerous towns and cities were left deserted. Not only would traveling outside be very dangerous, but it would also likely be an unnecessary venture. His Majesty is currently leading the army to recover his country. When he unites Grey Castle and restores order in all the 4 regions, you can then head out to wherever you wish. Scroll paused and picked up the registration form again. So, do you still think it's not necessary to fill out these forms? This time, no witch objected. On the way back to the castle, Wendy could not help but exclaim, "You were so brilliant, Scroll." I could hardly think of what to say during that moment. They must have been quite impressed by the witch union. I just took advantage of my position, said Scroll, with a smile. There were only 46 witches in the first batch. We'll be very busy for the next few days. Well, Wendy's voice sank to a whisper. What? Are you going to say you aren't suitable for the position of manager again? Scroll stopped walking. You have to know that His Majesty chose you because I've some qualities that the others don't have, right? Wendy chuckled. Rest assured. Since the last talk I had with His Majesty, I've already made up my mind. I was just thinking about how to welcome the arriving witches. Back then, I never thought twice about accompanying my sisters to find the holy mountain no matter how harsh the journey got. Things are much better now, and if I keep saying such nonsense, I would truly feel unworthy of the chaos drinks that I stole from Nightingale. Now that's more like it. Scroll said, relieved. I almost forgot about the drinks until you mentioned them just now. I helped you a lot back there. Are you not going to buy me a drink for it? How about tonight? I'll ask the kitchen to prepare some toasted mushrooms and fish fillets. Let's drink and hang out in my room, just like what we did the last time. If there aren't enough chaos drinks, we can borrow some from Nightingale. After all, she isn't here in the city right now, I can make it up to her later. That's settled then, Scroll said smilingly. By the way, Wendy examined Scroll's forehead with a curious look. Do you really remember all the personal information of more than 100,000 citizens? Don't you get confused by all that information? I don't know how to describe it. Scroll pondered for a moment. At the beginning, when I wanted to remember something, I had to recall it from the bottom of my memory. For example, if I wanted to look for a name, I needed to recall the date when this person registered and then the exact page in the registration book. It was very troublesome, and I would get a headache whenever I overthought. However, I found that the contents of my memory became more organized over time. What does that mean? It's as if all the details are sorted through automatically, and as soon as I start to recall something, I'll see all the relevant stuff right away. Scroll paused for a minute and appeared to be weighing her words. And the strange thing is that I can read a lot of the related items at the same time, in detail. Maybe this is what they mean by practice makes perfect. I see, said Wendy, greatly impressed. His Majesty once said that a person's memory was far more powerful than we could imagine. I found it unbelievable at that time, but now I believe that it's no exaggeration. Indeed, it's a wonderful feeling, Scroll nodded and said. Now, whenever I begin to search inside my head, I'll feel omniscient. But I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to remember everything after His Majesty unifies Grey Castle and extends his new management system to all the domains. Wendy was thrilled by this idea and thought, what does that mean? So if Scroll is still able to remember everything at that time, then all the people's life stories will be kept in her head. That means she'll be history itself. When Wendy was about to say something, sounds of hurried footsteps came from behind them. Lady Wendy, I finally find you, a young city hall clerk bowed to the 2 witches and said. There's a guy who came to the hall and refused to leave. He insisted on meeting the head of the witch union. We've told him that we'd pass on his message, but he said that he has something he must tell you face to face. Why did he come? What's his name? Scroll knitted her eyebrows and asked. His name was Pozak, answered the clerk. He told us the reason, but we think he might be mistaken. He said that he'd found a girl covered in blood when he was tending to the cattle. He thinks that she's a witch, but the girl was unconscious, so she couldn't respond to his questions. We've checked the work plan for today and didn't find any witch scheduled to work out of town. Do you have any idea as to what this might be about? Pozak, he's a local man and has a good record. He's even among the first batch of students of the agriculture class. I believe he doesn't mean to make trouble for the city hall. Scroll was puzzled and asked, might the witch be Leaf? That's impossible. Under the protection of the Heart of Forest, no one can hurt her. Wendy immediately denied Scroll's guess. Roland had decreed that all the new domains he seized this year should be sowed with golden twos. To fulfill this goal in time, he had asked Leaf to stay in the misty forest to continue cultivating the seeds instead of going to battle with the First Army. If some enemies were to break into the region of the misty forest that she controlled, we would have heard something about it. Don't forget that there are a group of workers responsible for carrying wheat seeds and also border guards monitoring the northern side of Neverwinter. If there was an attack, we should have heard the alarm by now. So then he must be mistaken? Anyways, let's meet the man first. We can still help the heavily wounded girl even if she's not a witch. With that being said, Wendy felt a hint of anxiety in her heart. Am I forgetting something? Chapter 903, The Demons Are Coming. In the city hall, the man named Pozak was brought before Wendy and Scroll. He was approximately 40 years old and looked like a typical farmer, swarthy and burly. There was still some dry mud and grass roots stuck onto his trousers. I know you, the man rubbed his wrinkled hands and looked a little nervous. He bowed to Scroll and said, You're the minister. My daughter learns how to read and write in your school. She's a really slow learner. I sincerely hope that you can bear with her faults. Don't be nervous, Scroll laughed and patted his shoulder. I used to catch fish for a living before I came here, but my harvest wasn't as steady as yours since the sea was too unpredictable. Furthermore, when it came to something like knowledge, it's never about a learner's background. No matter how clumsy the learner is, he or she will master the knowledge eventually given enough effort and time. Don't worry, your daughter will be able to graduate without issues. Hearing that, Pozak relaxed a lot and grinned. I've given up my work on the farm for grazing in recent 2 years because His Majesty said the salary for the new industry will be higher. With these words, he bowed to Wendy. You must be the manager of the Witch Union. I thought I didn't have the chance to meet you today. Although Wendy was not as influential as Scroll among the ordinary people, she was still the head of the Witch Union, and thus had to make appearances at various major events. That combined with her bright red hair and thick body, it was not at all surprising for people to recognize Wendy. Call me Wendy. I heard that you claimed to have found a heavily wounded girl who was covered with blood. What makes you think that she's a witch? Because, an ordinary person can't have animals' body parts, right? Pozak scratched his head. At first, I thought it was a rag smeared with blood and planned to tear it down and throw it away, but this thing turned out to be connected to a girl. I took a second look and found that it was actually an animal tail. An animal tail? Wendy felt her heart skip a beat. She suddenly recalled that a strange witch had come to Neverwinter more than 2 months ago, but she only knew her from Nightingale's description since this peculiar girl did not join the Witch Union or have any intimate contact with the sisters. She had a wolf's ears and a long tail, but surprisingly, His Majesty had praised that this weird half-animal was very pretty. Wendy now remembered about this strange incident that had repeatedly been mentioned by Nightingale. That strange witch is called Lorger, and she's a princess of a tribe in the southernmost region. Could she be the girl Pozak found? Where's she? Wendy urgently asked. Take us to her right now. The farmer had not taken the injured girl home. He had left her in a temporary rest shed in the pastoral area. Seeing the wolf girl in blood-stained clothes lying motionlessly on the bench, Wendy's heart sank to the bottom. From the girl's currently disfigured and bloody ears, she was sure that this girl was Lorger and wondered what in the world had happened to her. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was drenched in blood. Evidently, the wolf girl got herself injured more than just a few days ago. In some parts of her body, the blood had already dried up and turned into dark brown stains, while in some other parts, the blood was still dripping out of her wounds. They could not see her injuries directly, for she was wrapped in bandages from head to toe, but anyone could easily tell that she was seriously hurt. "My lady, she's a witch, isn't she?" Pozak asked. Wendy was too stunned to say anything, so Scroll replied, "Yes, she's a witch. Your first aid was done very nicely. It's great to know that. His Majesty has said in an announcement that we're obliged to inform the City Hall if we were to find a witch." Pozak heaved a sigh of relief, but soon he expressed his worry. "Can she still be saved?" Hearing this sentence, Wendy awoke with a start. She answered in a deep voice, "I don't know, but we'll try our best. Scroll, please help me take care of her. I'll go to meet Her Highness Tilly." "Okay, leave her to me." Neither Nana nor Lily was in the city, and Leaf's herbal medicine could only heal some minor injuries. Right now, receiving injuries this severe was no different from getting a death sentence. Fortunately, the first batch of witches from the Sleeping Island had just arrived at Neverwinter. Wendy thought that if that witch was here, she might be able to save the wolf girl. With that in her mind, she ran even faster. Every second counts. Although Lorgar was not an official member of the Witch Union, Wendy felt that the wolf girl was already somewhat related to the Union because this girl must have received some divine guidance and thus came to this city. Wendy did not want to lose a sister again. 3 days later, Wendy walked into a bedroom carrying a basin of hot water that gave off a strong smell of medicine. "How's her condition?" "She's still alive, but other than that," Ashes shook her head. "Such serious injuries are way beyond what can be handled by her self-healing capacity, and it was a miracle that she even made it to the city. If she had not been that strong-willed, she would have died in the wilderness without anyone knowing about it." When it came to treating wounds in the emergency, the Extraordinary was the most experienced one and thus took over taking care of the injured girl. She stripped off the wolf girl's blood-stained clothes for a general checkup. When the bandage was removed, all the witches were shocked by the injuries all over her body. Some cuts were so deep that one could see her bones. Cleaning her wounds alone cost them almost half a day. "But you don't have to worry too much." Ashes pointed to Nightfall, who was lying in a bed nearby. "Don't you notice that she looks a lot better than yesterday?" "Do I?" Nightfall asked in a weak voice. "How come I don't feel any better?" "You'll have steamed chicken, fried eggs, salt-roasted bird beak mushrooms, and a bottle of chaos drink for dinner tonight," Ashes smirked and said. "So, how are you feeling now?" Nightfall's mouth watered. "Well, actually, I think I'm feeling better now." "That's great, see?" Wendy breathed a sigh of relief and nodded to Nightfall. "Thanks a lot for helping us." "My pleasure," Nightfall forced a smile. "You guys helped Iffy. That means you've helped us. Now, please just don't let this girl die, otherwise We won't. You can rest assured." Nightfall was the person Wendy had thought of earlier. This witch of the former Bloodfang Association had an incredible ability called symbiosis. She could connect her own life to another one's by planting her magic seed in the person who would then become her symbiont. Through this connection, she could share the symbiont's pains and sufferings and thus help the person recover faster. More importantly, half of the nutrition she got during a symbiosis period could be absorbed by her symbiont. Given that, this ability was currently their best option to keep a near-death person from dying. Roland had been unconscious and unable to drink or eat anything for months after the Battle of Souls against Zero, and the only reason he was still alive was due to Nightfall's help. But of course, Nightfall was not the only one who came to help the wolf girl. Her Highness Tilly had sent another witch called Pandora, the primary healer for the Sleeping Island witches, to stop Lorgar's internal and external bleeding, which had significantly reduced the pressure on the symbiosis. Pandora's ability had been proved to be very helpful during their campaign to crush the rebellious action of the Bloodfang Association. Leaf's herbal medicine also helped to keep the wounds from worsening. The cleansing water, which was stored in the castle's basement together with the ice blocks in case of an emergency, prevented any infection from getting out of hand. Everyone did their best to help. However, whether Lorgar could come back to life still depended on her willpower. 3 days ago, they had sent animal messengers to the northern region. In the following days, they would have a difficult time waiting for information. Suddenly, Lorgar's finger flinched when Wendy was about to wipe her body. At first, Wendy was dumbfounded and believed that it might just be an illusion, but then she saw the wolf girl's lips tremble slightly. Lorgar appeared to be whispering something, but her voice was so feeble that her words were indistinguishable. Wendy's heart raced uncontrollably. She forced herself to calm down before she quickly bent forward and placed her ear close to Lorgar's mouth. This time, she was able to make out the girl's faint words. Demons. She repeated the word. The demons are coming. Chapter 904, Battle Alert, First Half. Vader would go out and patrol every time dusk came. Most of the time, he would circle Neverwinter with 2 or 3 of his subordinates. But sometimes, he would choose to head out alone. In theory, he was already the chief of the police department and the 3rd most authoritative person within the kingdom's security bureau, so he didn't need to do any patrols personally. But he continued to do so as he preferred to get himself involved in the field rather than doing paperwork in the office. He had already been in Neverwinter for a year and a half, and there were 2 things here that impressed him the most. The first was the exponential rate at which the city was expanding. It took him only half an hour to walk around Border Town when he first arrived, but now it would take him at least 3 times as long just to circle the city. That's not even including the harbor to the south and the farmlands to the east. Secondly, the law and order of Neverwinter could only be described as amazing. The most common crimes were theft and brawl, but they were also the most serious ones. Crimes such as homicide, robbery, kidnapping rarely happened. The security of Neverwinter had deteriorated before when there was a massive influx of refugees, but with the combined efforts of the police department and the Witch Union, the troublemakers were swiftly dealt with. His Majesty's promise on solving every single crime was not a bluff. In the face of Summer's retrospective ability and Vanilla's tracking ability, no criminal was able to escape the law. Due to the high risk and cost of crime, coupled with zero tolerance for black street rats, Neverwinter's public security was able to experience a visible improvement. He insisted on his daily patrols as he wanted to feel this peace. He would feel an immense sense of pride and satisfaction whenever he saw the carefree passers-by strolling around late at night and seeing the trusting look on their faces as they saluted to him. He was surprised himself that he could turn out to become a law enforcer respected by all instead of ending up a street thug that was condemned by the public. He had never experienced such a feeling when he was in the patrol team. Both of these jobs were designed for the same purpose. Even the procedure and the tasks were similar, yet they lead to entirely different results. The main difference would probably be the capabilities of the rulers. "Chief, should I go with you?" he was greeted by Whistle, who had just dispersed his troops outside the city hall. "Oh? Are you not going to spend time with that lady today?" "You even know about that?" Whistle's face suddenly began to turn red. "Well, it's not necessary to stay together every night." Some of the passers-by burst into laughter at his remark. "Then you'd better be careful, or else she will get stolen by someone else." Shut up." Vader shook his head with a smile. "I'll be fine to patrol alone today. You should finish up and head home." "Well, in that case, thanks, Chief." Looking at Whistle's back as he went away excitedly, Vader became a little emotional. When he had first left Valencia, he was alone and had thought that he would spend the rest of his life in solitude. He did not expect that he would be able to accomplish so much in his life. He started to consider finding his significant other after buying an adjoining house for his father Kakuzim and himself. Just as Vader was about to walk out of City Hall, a shrilling alarm suddenly went off in the city. Woo, woo. His face froze. The sound of this alarm was utterly different from the ones that were used before. It consisted of a crescendo that was in an endless repeat. It was the kind of sound that would not be forgotten when heard once. It represented the highest level of alert that was not heard even in the months of demons. In fact, he had only rehearsed it during a drill, so this was the first time he had actually heard the alarm blare across the city. According to procedures, when the highest alarm sounded, Neverwinter would be placed under martial law. The city gates had to be all closed. The police would be responsible for clearing the streets, while the First Army would form a defensive perimeter. Chief Whistle and the rest that were with him rushed out of the office. Vader turned around and saw that the entire city hall was at a standstill. Everyone was so overwhelmed and stunned that they were frozen stiff on the spot. His Majesty is now leading the troops to recover the Kingdom of Grey Castle, so this is definitely not a drill. Just what exactly had happened that would make the garrison sound this alarm? Damn it, it just had to happen now when Neverwinter is at its most vulnerable. He gritted his teeth and shouted, "Stop standing there. Hurry up and get into action. Whistle, recall everyone that's on vacation. Firehead, take the rest and follow me to the wall. Do what you did when we carried out the exercise. Do you understand?" Vader's thunderous voice not only awakened the police members from their daze, but it also shook the city hall officials into action. "Yes, I understand." The city hall became busy instantly, but Vader was in no mood to bother about those officials. He rushed out of the castle area with a group of police. When he saw the confused residents on the street, Vader felt completely stressed out. Since this alarm system was only put into practice after the new year, it had not even gone through a citywide drill. Perhaps His Majesty did not expect such an emergency to happen so soon. But now that it did, it can only be considered as a careless mistake by the garrison. If the decision were up to him, he would have sounded the regular alarm bell at the same time, as to evacuate the people wandering on the streets. But anyways, now was not the time to complain. Vader clapped his hands and made the surrounding residents focus their attention on him. "Everyone listen up. Go home right now and stay indoors. This is an alarm of an enemy attack. I repeat. Everyone go back home now. Go home immediately and don't stay here." Firehead and the rest also started to follow his example and shouted out to warn everyone. Fortunately, the police department had the trust of the residents. Coupled with the fact that the administrative department had also gone through multiple drills with the routine alarms, everyone started to move to the residential quarters after hearing the warnings. In this manner, a group of people started to shout as they ran towards the city wall. The soldiers were everywhere on top of the city wall, and flags were flapping widely against the setting sun. The artilleries on the platform were readied and aimed towards the vast grassland in front, waiting to fire as soon as they see any slight movement. Witnessing this scene, Vader was able to calm down a little. As long as the First Army was around, no army can breach through this invincible defense line. This was a point-proven battle after battle. The police quickly committed themselves to on-site security and ensured a minimal level of order. But Vader was puzzled as to why, while the highest level of alarm was sounding, the grasslands and jungles of the western region remained motionless. Where are the enemy? In the meantime, another group of people started quarreling in one of the meeting rooms at the Lord's castle. Because of an unknown witch's mumbling, "You triggered the alarm of the highest level?" Berev looked at Wendy with an expression of disbelief. "Do you know how much trouble and loss this will cause us? We don't even know whether this woman named Lorger can be trusted. And if I'm not mistaken, your only evidence is her sleep talk. It's ridiculous to shut down half of Neverwinter only based on this. How do you expect me to explain this to His Majesty if we end up not being able to accomplish our previously assigned tasks?" Chapter 905, Battle Alert, Second Half. According to His Majesty Roland's plan, the City Hall, the Security Bureau, the First Army, and the Witch Union were the four major organizations that constituted the administrative body of Grey Castle. Except for the Security Bureau, for the other three organizations to take action, they would first have to get approval and support from the other departments. This set of rules was initially made to utilize the full potential of the kingdom. When His Majesty was around, hardly anything would go wrong. However, the problems would usually arise when His Majesty was absent from Neverwinter. It was difficult for the three parties to reach consensus on any given topic in a short time. Hence, when Wendy heard demons are coming, she thought the best course of action would be to sound the alarm first and ensure the safety of Neverwinter before going through the process of holding a meeting. It wasn't as if she didn't know how much trouble this would cause for the city hall. There were wheat fields in the misty forest that produced hundreds of bags of golden 2 seeds every day. Those seeds need to be transported to the docks by workers before they can be shipped to the northern region, the Southern Territory and the other newly conquered territories of His Majesty. Also, the supply of timber, mushrooms, and fruits from the forests would be negatively affected. The livestock farming in the grassland pastures would also be stalled. Barev's scolding was not entirely uncalled for. Originally, the plan was to build a new city wall before the Third Battle of Divine Will. This new wall would cover the north side of the city and encompass half of the grassland. They would form multiple layers of defense together with the existing walls, thus effectively improving the defense line of the impassable mountain range. The ore smelting area and factory in the north of the city would then be much safer. The flow of resources from the forests and the North Slope mine would not be cut off even after battle commences. But this plan was after all still a plan. No one expected that news of the demons would come so soon. Compared with the financial and trade losses, Wendy made this decision out of caution. Are the demons not a good enough reason, mortal? The curtains hanging down the walls of the conference room started to sway as Elle's voice resounded in everyone's mind. You cannot slack at all when dealing with the demons. They're no foolish demonic beasts. They won't wait for you to prepare before attacking. I don't think you're aware of how terrifying our enemy is. That's a real pity. After witnessing your king's brilliance, I thought you common people have made significant progress over the past few hundred years. As an ally in the fight against the demons, Tequila survivors and members of the sleeping spell naturally had the right to attend the meeting. Both Pasha and Tilly expressed their approval regarding Wendy's decision to sound the alarm of the highest level. Barev was so angry that he nearly laughed out of frustration. Yes. It is true that I do not know how scary these demons are because I've never actually seen them myself. But are you saying that these guys can launch an attack out of thin air? You kept mentioning how we have to be well prepared for their attack, and that I agree with. However, the problem is that we can't even spot the enemy's shadow right now. There's the witch-controlled misty forest to our west and the watchtowers on the impassable mountain range to our east. Between the two is a flat, coverless grassland. Any movements made by the enemy will be seen from miles away. Do we have to be even more cautious? It was clear that the City Hall director was wholeheartedly devoted to Neverwinter's expansion tasks that were entrusted to him by His Majesty himself. Wendy remembered that at the last meeting, Barev dared not even breathe loudly in front of the monstrous original carrier, yet now he even rebutted her directly. Not to mention the obvious sarcasm in his voice. I think it's necessary, said Ashes. In fact, I was the one who suggested the idea to Wendy. And what's your reason? Is it still because of the mumbo-jumbo of a half-asleep witch that came from who knows where? Barev slammed his palm on the table. Don't tell me that you believe her. If her words can actually be trusted, or if your relationship is that close, then why isn't she a member of the Witch Union yet? That's not the reason. I judged the situation based on facts, Ashes explained calmly. I have fought with her before, and I am aware of her capability. If it were just one or two hybrid demonic beasts, she wouldn't have ended up in such a dire situation. According to what we know, a mad demon without the support of the demon stone is about the same with a demonic hybrid in terms of combat prowess. Furthermore, even if Lorgar couldn't overpower them in a confrontation, she could have simply just turned into a wolf and escaped. What exactly are you trying to say? She most likely ran into more than 10 demons. There must have also been a flying devil beast that could track her from the air that caused her to be so severely injured. Ashes said matter-of-factly, besides, we also found a map on her. If we are not mistaken, the characters on it were written there by lightning. Although we don't know the details of her trip, one thing was certain, she had ventured out into the wasteland after she left Neverwinter. If there were suddenly so many demons in the barbarian land, then we'd better start preparing to deal with whatever they are planning. I also agree with this judgment. Pasha's voice was much softer than Elle's. Distance means nothing to the devil beast. If they really wanted to attack Neverwinter, the news of their attack might still be on their way from the watchtowers when the devil beast has already landed in the city. Not to mention that most people don't even know about the demons. If the enemy were to just drop into the city without any preparation on our side, the result would be catastrophic. Tilly added and said, the alarm would at least give people the time to go back to their homes and hide. This allows us to control the panic to a certain extent. But, Berev was at a loss for words. To him, compared to the first few people who voiced their opinions, the words of Princess Tilly certainly held more weight. It was not because she was the leader of the Sleeping Island Witches, but it was due to her being part of the Wimbledon family. As she was a member of the royal family and the sister of the ruling king, the city hall director naturally had second thoughts about blatantly refuting her words. He turned toward the head of the First Army garrison, who was a quiet, middle-aged hunter, trying to pull someone to his side. But the man remained silent and just stared straight ahead as if he was not paying any attention to the argument. Seeing the atmosphere tense up, Wendy took a deep breath and stood up. I've already sent the message to the northern region, so His Majesty should be informed about Neverwinter's current situation and issue countermeasures soon. Lorgar could also wake up any moment now. So I hope the director can stop worrying so much. As long as we gain a clearer picture of what's happening, we can easily call off the martial law. But before that, everyone should still be more cautious. She paused and said, as for the task set out by His Majesty beforehand, we can make it up through other means. Berev frowned and asked, such as? We might be able to use the devouring worm to transport the wheat. All the Neverwinter workers would have to do is transport the wheat from the Misty Forest to the third border city. Wendy looked at the tequila survivors in the light curtain and said, this way, the wheat can still be loaded onto the transport ships even without having the workers leave the perimeter of the city. What? Elle was displeased and said, we're soldiers, not porters. But as allies, this is something we can do. Pasha stretched out her tentacles and curled them around Elle's body, although Elle did not appear to have a mouth at all. Wendy nodded thankfully and said, livestock can be transferred in the same way, and since Honey has a lot of control over animals, we don't have to worry about them being scared by Fran. The western region has an abundance of grasslands, and the lands along the shores of the Redwater River can be used as temporary pastures. Berev's expression still did not look satisfied, but his frown had loosened up a bit. I know these measures can't completely erase the damage caused by imposing martial law, but right now, Neverwinter's safety is our utmost priority. Wendy knew perfectly well that it would not be enough to rely on tenderness if she did not want to let His Majesty down and carry out her role as head of the Witch Union. She must step up and become a person that people can rely on. If there are any losses caused by this decision, I'm willing to take full responsibility. Chapter 906, Unveiling the Mystery, Part 1. In the following week, the atmosphere within the castle was incredibly tense. Hour-long meetings were held every day, during which all the ministers from each department would come to report and discuss the current situation. So? Are you still unable to find a trace of the demons? Berev sipped his tea as he glanced at the people around the table. He looked much more relaxed than he had been a couple of days ago. Wendy's promise to take full responsibility for her actions seemed to have lifted a heavy burden off his mind. Either that or the smooth implementation of the plan for transporting the Golden Twos likely relieved some of his stress. The First Army's lookouts have already expanded their surveillance range to the edge of the grassland, but they still couldn't find anything, the garrison leader replied concisely. Further north lies the barbarian land, which is covered by a dense forest. Without sufficient supplies, it would be tough to expand our perimeter any further. And that's all you can do, common people. You'll probably die to the insects living in the forests before you even get a chance to see the demons. Alethea seemed keen on scoffing at the people of Neverwinter at every chance she got. Just leave it to us. A team of 10 God's Punishment witches has already gone 15 kilometers into the fertile plains and set up a small outpost at the Pearl Lake. The Pearl Lake? Wendy asked. It's marked with a lot of birds' nest on the Wolf Girl's map. The place was once full of lakes and springs, but now most of it has already turned into a swamp. There shouldn't be any dangers, right? Rest assured. When it comes to fighting demons, we're far more experienced than you people. Any god's punishment which can deal with 3 to 4 mad demons at the same time. With 5 witches as a team, they would have no problem wiping out a small demon patrol, Alethea said confidently. Of course, if the wolf girl did run into a patrol team, then I'm afraid that the enemy's main force is most likely already closing in on us. Are they incapable of acting alone? Barav asked out of curiosity. Due to their reliance on the red mist, it's impossible for the demons to stray too far away from their supply line, Pasha explained. After all, demons can't move around freely like human beings who only need to breathe in air. Well then. As the enemy is still quite far away from Neverwinter, why can't we call off the alert now? Unless we can set up a web of sentry posts around Neverwinter, we won't be able to fully eliminate the possibility of the enemy sneaking into the city. But even then, the sentry posts would mean little to us, another senior witch added. Without enough sigils of listening, the sentries won't have enough time to send back the warning even if they were to catch sight of the devil beasts. The extreme environment of the barbarian land formed an invisible barrier which barred any news from going through in time. It was as if a layer of mist shrouded the whole area to the northwest of Neverwinter, and all they could do was to search for tiny clues in the wilderness. When Wendy realized this fact, she could not help but sigh in her heart. Lorgar's news truly came at a bad time. If His Majesty had not left for the expedition, it would have taken only a day or 2 for Sylvie, Lightning, Maggie, and Nightingale to scout out the current situation of the entire northern side of the impassable mountain range. My own ability isn't particularly helpful in this kind of situation. Suddenly, Tilly asked, Mr. Director, you may feel that I'm being nosy, but could you please tell me how the people of the city has reacted to the situation these past few days? Were they scared or panicked? That will be my pleasure, Your Highness. Barav hastened to put down his teacup and bow to Princess Tilly with a hand on his chest. Everything in the city is within the control of City Hall. Recently, our clerks have received lots of inquiries, but most people just want to know where the enemy is and whether the First Army needs help. So the news has heightened our people's morale rather than stressing them out. Even the productivity of the night shift has significantly improved. Please rest assured. No one blames the Sleeping Island witches for the coming demons. Well, that's good then. Of course, we've also received some complaints about the price increases for birdbeak mushrooms and pinecones. City Hall Director eyed Wendy blankly. If we don't cancel the alert in time, the prices of eggs will also begin to skyrocket. Let's put aside those matters for now. I think we need to raise the awareness about demons as soon as possible. Since the demons are completely different from all our previous enemies, Tilly said worriedly. If someone takes this chance to stir up troubles and stigmatizes the witches as devil's minions again, the trust between the common people and the witches will be destroyed. Barav hesitated. I have to consult His Majesty about this matter. So let's write it down in today's report. Tilly looked at Wendy. Understood. Wendy nodded. When she was about to summarize all the reports today, a burst of rapid footsteps interrupted the silence in the conference hall. They heard Ring's voice before seeing her. La Lady Wendy, the wolf girl woke up. What? Everyone stood up in surprise. Wendy could hardly wait to meet the girl and said, I'm coming right now. Ahem, I'll also go to have a look. Barav was about to follow, but Ashes stopped him. That's a girl's bedroom you're talking about. I think it would be better if you just stayed here and waited for our news. The moment Wendy entered the room, she saw that Lorgar was struggling to get up from the bed, and beads of sweat were welling up on her forehead. She looked pale. Her broken ears drooped, and her hair seemed dry and dull. I can't believe it. I'm still alive. She panted and then turned her head to look at the crowd pouring into the room. How long have I been unconscious? 10 days have passed since we found you. Wendy gently pressed her back into the bed. Don't move. Your limbs, bones, and even inner organs have suffered severe injuries. 10 days isn't enough for them to recover. You survive these days because of Nightfall's seed of symbiosis, but you still ought to stay in bed and rest before Nana comes back. After knowing the use of seed of symbiosis, Lorgar slightly inclined her head to greet Nightfall, who was lying in a bed nearby, and said, "Thank you. That's all right." Nightfall shrugged her shoulders, trying to appear casual. "And I think it's quite good to be able to lie in bed and have chaos drinks every day." "What exactly did you meet in the depths of the barbarian land?" Ashes asked in a deep voice. "You've mentioned demons many times in your sleep." "Yes, I did encounter demons, many of them." Lorgar closed her eyes to recall what had happened. "At first, I met 2 demons by themselves when I was chasing a hybrid demonic beast. They might have been scouts, or perhaps they were just out hunting for some demonic beasts." She took a deep breath. "I managed to kill them both, but I never expected that these 2 demons are but droplets in the vast ocean when compared to the army of demons that I spotted soon after. Countless demons swarmed the Tequila ruins, and among them were several colossal monsters." Hearing the wolf girl's description, all the people in the bedroom fell silent. Chapter 907, Unveiling the Mystery, Part 2. Roland and Lightning had once told Lorgar that if an opponent was too strong for her to take on alone, it would be better to withdraw and report the news back to Neverwinter as soon as possible. Lorgar always kept this in mind. When she discovered the demon army, she decided to return to the Neverwinter immediately. After all, she had already proven herself in her previous battles, and she knew that she would have plenty more chances to fight against these demons once they invaded Neverwinter. Despite having made that decision, Lorgar did not leave the vicinity immediately and instead decided to scout out the movements of the demons from a higher vantage point. She did not want to embarrass herself by telling everyone in the city that she fled at the sight of the demon army. Lorgar thought that if she were able to bring back more information about the demons, then even the great chief would owe her a huge favor. All this time, she had been trying to prove herself and gain the great chief's recognition rather than his apology. It did not matter whether his words that day were out of genuine concern or just mockery. Simply put, for the wolf girl, this was about her honor. But for the entire Wildflame clan, this would significantly improve their status in the great chief's heart. That was why she chose to stay in this dangerous place. Of course, she would never tell the witches what went through her mind as she did this. She would simply tell them that she was just curious. She began to describe her experience to the witches. "I quickly found an abandoned stone tower that was covered by moss and vines near the ruins of Tequila. Half of the tower had already crumbled down, but it was still the best spot in the area for me as a vantage point. To be able to transform and run away any minute in case of an emergency, I took off my clothes and stored them in my backpack. I wrapped myself in a cloak and climbed up to the top of the tower. As I reached the top, I happened to find an opening in the tower walls that was covered by vines. This was a perfect hiding spot for me, as many devil beasts flew over my position without spotting me. Only then, I was finally able to get a clear picture of the massive beasts. Those are actually not living creatures. They're not alive?" Much surprised, Wendy could not help but interrupt. "I think so," Lorgar said in a low voice. "Those monsters didn't seem to have any characteristics of a living creature. They were more like..." "Like what?" "Like the iron bridge that your people built over the Redwater River." The witches looked at each other in bewilderment. "A bridge?" "I also couldn't believe it back then, but that's how they look like." Lorgar coughed twice weakly. Those monsters had straight backs which looked like the deck of a bridge. On either side of its torso, there were 2 long legs which resembled the pillars that support the bridge. However, neither its torso nor its limbs were covered by flesh. I was able to see right through its body with the empty gaps between its bones and metal pieces. Wendy gasped in fright. "A walking steel bridge? Is this a new invention of the demons?" After resting for a short while, Lorgar continued, "Each skeleton monster is nearly 30 meters tall with many demons secured to the top of it. From a distance, it looked as if insect eggs covered its surface. A huge sac hanged on one side of its abdomen, and it looked like some inner organ that had fallen out of its body. I could see it pulsating with a dark red mist surging under the skin. She clenched her fist and then gently placed it on her chest. By the name of 3 gods, those monsters looked like evil incarnate. Ashes frowned, and then? These monsters laid down by the ruins, and hundreds of tubes came out of the sack and inserted themselves into the ground. Within seconds, all the soil surrounding them turned into dark brown clods and the weeds and trees around withered, as if life was somehow drained out of them. After that, most of the demons sank into the ground, leaving only a couple hundred of mad demons and a dozen of devil beasts in the ruins. I guess they were responsible for some scouting or patrolling tasks. Have you ever seen a demon which has countless eyes and tentacles? It usually stays at a higher place. It looks like a wiggling blob at first glance. Wendy asked while noting down the wolf girl's description. Do you mean a multi-eyed demon? Lorgar shook her head. Lightning mentioned this dangerous monster to me, but I didn't find anything like it in the army of demons. So how did you get hurt? I underestimated the enemies. Lorgar looked a little depressed. I hid at the top of the tower for 3 days. Many devil beasts flew across this area during this period, but it seemed that none of them were seriously patrolling the place. When I heard a mad demon blowing a horn, I thought it wouldn't attract the attention of the main force, but when I started to run away, I found that several squads of demons had already been lying in wait nearby for me. Wait. Do you mean they ambushed you? Nightfall asked, surprised. How come the demons were able to make this kind of arrangement? You guys said before that they were nothing but strong, simple-minded beasts? The demons from the lowest rank are indeed stupid beasts, but once they get a commander, the situation will be different, Tilly said in a low voice. There must have been a senior demon among the enemies that besieged Lorgar. In the face of an unknown enemy, no one can come up with a perfect battle tactic. Ashes patted the wolf girl's shoulder. You were able to escape from such a formidable enemy and return to Neverwinter alive. That in itself is already an impressive achievement. This was the first time Wendy had heard such a compliment from the extraordinary. Maybe. Fortunately, the senior demon didn't come to capture me personally. Lorgar forced a weak smile. Immediately after I knew that I was spotted, I transformed into a wolf and tried to escape under the cover of the night. During the pursuit, their spear throwers were unable to hit me in the darkness. I don't know how many enemies were after me at that time, but some devil beasts were always hovering over my position. You killed all the demons chasing you? Tilly asked confusedly. Hearing that, Wendy also began to wonder. If Lorgar couldn't get rid of the enemies besieging her, she would remain in a passive position under attack. The fact that she had suffered severe injuries also proved this point. It seems that she was in quite a desperate situation. No, they gave up hunting me, Lorgar replied. I don't understand why. If they had chosen to run after me for another day, I would have died from exhaustion. But surprisingly, they all just suddenly withdrew. Red mist. Tilly quickly responded. They must have been afraid of wastefully using up the red mist that they brought with them. Do you remember the place where they started to retreat? Lorgar thought for a moment while rubbing her forehead. It's probably about 2,500 or 3,000 meters away from the grassland. Where's the map? Give me a map quickly. Seeing Tilly measuring distances on a map, Wendy gradually realized what the skeleton monsters mentioned by Lorgar might be. She thought of the church's siege beasts and guessed that the skeleton monsters were possibly also some machine driven by magic power, which was used to transport red mist. If that was the case, everything in Lorgar's description would make sense. The demons sinking into the ground and the soil polluted by red mist was just like the scene in the Devil's Town behind the snow mountain. According to Lorgar's report, the devil beasts that set out from the Tequila ruins could only make it to the edge of the barbarian land. Does this mean that Neverwinter is still safe? Wendy wondered. After recounting her experience to the witches, Lorgar was exhausted and some blood began to leak out of her wounds and had stained her bandage once more. Seeing this, Wendy comforted the wolf girl and asked her to take some rest before Nana's return. After that, she led the witches out of the bedroom and gently closed the door behind them. Chapter 908, A Bloody Road. Back in the meeting room, Wendy read out the newly acquired intelligence from the beginning. However, Elle rudely interrupted her when she started to talk about the safety measures. There is no such thing as a safe distance when it comes to the demons. Tequila paid a heavy price before realizing this, and it would be extremely risky to use the red mist's consumption area to plan for the war zone. For instance, devil beasts are capable of carrying multiple gas tanks, thus extending their attack range, or they could bury a batch of gas tanks in advance and then replace them as they marched. Naturally, the most direct measure would be to build outposts and use them as links to extend the attacking range. Fighting to gain control of these outposts will be crucial in the Battle of Divine Will. Unfortunately, it will be tough to find all the hidden sentry posts in the vast plains. Never forget that the demons are always more cunning than you can ever comprehend. Wendy could not help but imagine the scene Elle had described. The overwhelming army of demons would be launching fierce head-on attacks while at the same time setting up outposts everywhere to store their red mist. If they succeed, the whole area would be quickly overrun by an endless horde of demons. This would have had cut off the communication and transportation of resources within the Old Union's territories, which in turn would also endanger the surrounding areas. It would be like a stone rolling down a slope. The more land they lose, the harder it would be to resist the demons. In the end, they would no longer be capable of fighting back. In your opinion, what are the chances of them attacking Neverwinter City? Tilly asked calmly. I must say that you are fortunate, or rather we are all very fortunate, Elle said while stretching her tentacles. Even though we can't use the red mist to determine the enemy's attacking range, at least we can determine their intentions through it. I don't think the demons are likely to launch a large-scale attack on Neverwinter City in the immediate future. Could you elaborate? The red mist. The ancient witch nodded its blob head. Any movements the demons make are based on their supply of the red mist. The fact that they went underground and left only their patrol team above ground instead of building a camp means that there aren't enough resources for them to use. Even if there were attacks at the border, it would probably only consist of a few small skirmishes. Of course, whether or not this situation will change in the future will have to depend on whatever happens from now on. Tilly shifted her gaze to Pasha. Elle's judgment is credible, said the latter while shaking her mane tentacles. During the days of the Union, she led a small platoon of the Blessed Army and successfully attacked the Devil's Town multiple times, but her temper is rather bad. My patience is only used on things that are worth worrying over, Elle said bluntly. Compared to the Devil Beast's long-range sneak attacks, I'm more concerned about those new war machines. I would like to ask, how did the demons transport red mist before? Bearer finally found a chance to talk. Pretty much in the same way we would transport our supplies, Pasha sighed, with low-level demons, carts, enslaved demonic hybrids or transformed siege beasts. The time they require to prepare for war is also close to that of ours. Every time a battle was about to start, one could see dozens of red mist supply lines running across the entire fertile plains. To stop the transportation of the red mist, everyone including the Blessed Army, the combat witches, and the common troops would have to go all out. When we had to face a well-guarded red mist transport platoon, the blood of our soldiers would dye the whole plains red. As a result, those red mist supply lines were both the demons and our troops' line of life or death. Elle added. Everyone in the room was a bit startled by those words. Even though they have not officially fought against the demon army yet, everyone could already feel the pressure that this fierce race had put on humanity 400 years ago. Under the guidance of His Majesty Roland, even Wendy could understand the importance of logistics. Transportation of supplies was undoubtedly a measure of an army's capability in sustaining itself. Suppose the demons did have the ability to construct such a large vehicle to transport red mist. This would mean that they would be able to provide large quantities of supplies for the front lines without expanding too many forces. Fewer supply lines would mean that there would be a higher concentration of troops guarding the transport teams. Perhaps the scene that Lorker saw would become standard for the demons' inevitable march. If it weren't for Roland Wimbledon, she really would have no idea how the Third Battle of Divine Will was to be fought. It was clear that the demons have changed dramatically. There are now senior demons who can move around independently, not to mention the appearance of the gigantic skeleton monsters. Other than Neverwinter City, the rest of the human kingdom's strength was probably even weaker than during the Union's time. She did not even dare to imagine a scene where those noble knights would charge into the sea of demons. All in all, the current situation does not completely refute our previous assumptions, only the time was misjudged. Aware of the fact that overemphasizing the hardships of war was probably not good for morale, Elle coughed twice and changed the subject. The Blackrock Spire, which can produce red mist, needs to be built on the god's stone mineral veins. So it's not surprising that the enemy chose to capture the ruins of the Holy City. After all, Tequila is now the easternmost god's stone mining place on the fertile plains. Once the demons construct the spire, the range of the red mist will directly cover the impassable mountain range. At that time, any resistance will be futile. No one could object to the fact that if the demons were no longer restricted in their movements, they would be able to launch attacks from any direction. And their flying devil beasts were much more flexible than the hydrogen balloon. It would be highly possible to get attacked by them if one left the city area. In a situation like this, it would be unlikely for humans to be able to resist for more than a couple years, and in the end, they would be annihilated. Though Wendy was not very familiar with the intricacies of war, she still had participated in these kinds of meetings multiple times. She knew that both His Majesty Roland and the Church of Hermes were adamant in stopping the demons' plan to occupy the Tequila ruins. It seems like the three parties were in agreement on this point. Fortunately, the demons have exposed their intentions prematurely, and considering how the bloody moon won't appear for another 3 to 5 years, we can still prepare ourselves to the fullest before launching a decisive attack. Elle continued. Even if we fail, the nearest Blackrock Spire to the demons is in the fertile plains, which is hundreds of miles north of the Dragon's Pine Mountains. So in terms of supply lines, they don't have any advantage over us. But anyways, one thing is certain. War is now upon us. Wendy suddenly felt that her shoulders had become a lot heavier. Wait, Bear suddenly shouted. How you decide to fight the demons does not concern me. However, we can't keep the gates closed forever, right? Since we now know that the army of demons is still far from Neverwinter City and that they won't attack us for the time being, shouldn't we call off the alert and get those farms back up and running? I believe that Neverwinter requires a more reliable alarm system. The head of the garrison followed up. His Majesty mentioned before that establishing a deeper defensive line would allow a higher margin of error when it came to the alarms. I was wondering if it's possible to ask Miss Lotus to construct a few beacon towers along the plains. Of course, it would be even better if we utilized what His Excellency Carter had mentioned, a communication tool that can connect dozens of miles instantaneously. This way, the City Hall's work wouldn't be delayed. The first option was easy, but the second required both Anna and Roland since nobody knew how to actualize it. Also, delivering news through beacons may not be necessarily faster than a devil beast ambush. Wendy hesitated for a moment, but before she could reply, Pasha's voice sounded in their heads. Leave this to us. What do you plan to do? Ashes raised her eyebrows. Since we already know the location of the demon's camp, it makes things a lot simpler. Pasha stretched out her tentacle and showed it in the light curtain. Through this, we can create a complete surveillance system to watch the demons, similar to a light curtain. In her tentacle, there was a 5-colored stone. Wendy immediately remembered what number 76 Phyllis had done before. Do you plan to use it to locate the phantom instrument? Exactly. Once shattered, the magic core will unfold the light curtain in the corresponding position. But the number of these magic stones are limited. Each time we use one of them, their number will decrease. At the same time, they are also essential in finding the keys of the chosen one. Therefore, I will only be able to use it in extremely important situations. But, she instantly thought of another problem. This requires someone to get close to the Tequila ruins, correct? But the demons have already. Rest assured. There is no need for you to worry. Since it's our idea, we will be the ones executing it. Elle said. Tequila would never do something as cowardly as proposing a plan only to have others execute it. This is but a small matter. All God's punishment witches are prepared to sacrifice themselves. But it's still the best if you do not have to sacrifice yourselves, Tilly interrupted the other side with a smile. Leave the task of placing the magic stone to the sleeping spell. Though their fighting capacity is limited, they do possess a variety of skills. Also, being the newcomers in the western region, they must also contribute in order to gain everyone's approval, isn't that right? Chapter 909, A Problem in Dreamland, Part 1. Your Majesty. Roland? The voice was soft and distant. It wasn't until Roland felt a tickling sensation around his ear that he suddenly realized someone was calling his name. You spaced out again. Nightingale leaned dramatically on the long table, looking right into Roland's eyes. She held her chin in her hand, with her head slightly lopsided, and one pale index finger was swaying from side to side. It was obvious that she had used that finger to fiddle with Roland's ear. Really? Roland cleared his throat, pretending that he was reading the statistical report that had just come in. Probably because of the warm weather today. It makes me doze off easily. This isn't the first time you started daydreaming. Nightingale walked back to the recliner on the other side of the tent. Ever since you came back from Reflection Church, you've constantly been in a daze. Has anything happened? Roland was about to deny what she had said, but the words got caught in his throat. He knew Nightingale could tell lies from truth, and he could not continue to deceive himself either. Even though it had been almost a week, he still could not understand what was going on. I did find something wrong. But the whole thing is so creepy and weird that I don't know where to start. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. Nightingale stared at the sky above, her hands behind her head. I'm not as smart as you anyway. Even if you were to tell me, I wouldn't be of much help. Perhaps Anna would be more useful in this area. I haven't told her either. Roland shook his head, forcing a smile. Oh, is that so? Nightingale turned over immediately. Why not? Because it's so bizarre that I'm afraid it's beyond the scope of my understanding, Roland said flatly. As much as I hate to admit, it doesn't affect anything. In other words, this is completely personal. Telling her wouldn't help any, it would only make her worry. I see. Nightingale blinked as if sudden enlightenment had struck her. Roland, however, knew she did not understand anything but just thought the whole idea cool. Don't tell her that I frequently daydream. Roland reminded Nightingale. This is something nobody else can solve. Of course. Nightingale's face somehow lighted up. She patted her chest, produced a slice of grilled fish from the sack and shoved it into her mouth, looking quite satisfied. After obtaining Nightingale's promise, Roland sighed internally. The data on the statistical report did not make any sense to him. What Roland had seen in the secret chamber of the church cluttered his mind. Why would a legendary figure appear at the early stage of the foundation of the Union? From her portrait, it seemed that she had existed even before the Union age. Roland had later made inquiries to Isabella, Agatha, and Phyllis, but none of them had given him a definite answer. It was such a dim and distant past that nobody could tell who the person in the picture was. They could only conjecture that she had, at one time, been prominent. Roland used to think that there were only two types of people in the dream world. One was those defeated by Zero, whose souls were permanently bound to the building of souls but who still more or less maintained a feeble connection with the real world. The most typical features of them were the astonishing resemblance of their physical appearances and the memory fragments in their rooms. The other type were fictitious characters who came out of thin air directly from the dream world. They were fabrications of his imagination and the dream world itself. Roland was now not sure about his theory, however. Isabella told him that, according to her service records during the time she had served the Pope, Zero should be between 200 to 250 years old. Therefore, it seemed impossible for Zero, the pure witch who never aged, to imprison a person living 800 years ago. Although Zero was much older than ordinary people, numerous figures in history had had much greater longevity than her. Zero had been born after the establishment of the church. Based on seniority, Agatha and some other witches were old enough to be her grandmother. Could the person in the picture intrude the dream world by herself? This hypothesis was even bolder and more inconceivable. How can a woman from an ancient civilization survive in modern society and disguise herself so well? Where was her soul before the existence of the dream world? Also, Lan's physical appearance contradicted this hypothesis. She was elegant and graceful indeed, but she was by no means attractive, which meant that she was not a witch. Without any extraordinary power, one would, without exception, return to the earth 100 years after one's death, no matter how great they used to be. The most reasonable explanation, although the least creative one, other than the above-noted two assumptions, was that the two people happened to look the same. In other words, it was a pure coincidence. It would save Roland a lot of trouble if he adopted this theory, but he had a hard time convincing himself. Is it really a coincidence? To find the answer, he probably had to ask her in person. Roland felt a little reluctant to enter that increasingly bizarre dream world. At the same time, however, he did not like the feeling of throwing himself into the unknown and being kept in the dark either. In theory, it was better to pick the lesser of two evils. After hesitating for about a week, Roland finally made up his mind. It was worth mentioning, though, that the nagging tequila gods punishment witches and the free time after the tour of the holy city of Hermes had also contributed a great deal to his decision-making process. Roland was now accustomed to entering the dream world. When he woke up, he noticed the calendar still showed the date on which he had last left. The surrounding had not changed a bit during his 1 month's absence. The picture of the Martialist trainees on the nightstand still looked new, as if they were recently brought back from the headquarters of the Martialist Association. Roland took out his cell phone and dialed Garcia's number. He soon got through and heard even breathing on the other end of the line. "Hello?" Roland glanced through the window. The first hint of dawn was faintly visible in the east. "Are you doing morning exercises?" Roland asked. "Cut the crap," Garcia snapped as she usually did, but her voice was no longer as crisp as before. "What's up?" "Well, I want to discuss something with you." "Is it a good time for you?" "I can come over now. We can have breakfast together, my treat." "Is it that urgent?" Garcia was silent for a moment. "Come down. I'm in the alley right in front of the apartment." "Wait for me." Roland hung up, got changed as fast as he could and dashed out of the room. When he passed the living room, however, he found Zero, still not entirely awake, half-dressed. It was apparent that the little girl had just woken up. Her wrinkled pajama tumbled down to one side, revealing half of her lovely fair shoulder. She was waddling in a pair of oversized men's slippers, which were apparently his. Roland clapped his hand over his forehead. He had no choice but to turn around and help the little girl get dressed. "Just a moment. I'll make some water downstairs," Zero mumbled. "That's okay. I'll bring you breakfast. You just wait here for the food after you brush your teeth and wash your face." Roland patted her on the head and pushed her into the bathroom before he scurried out. Chapter 9-10, A Problem in Dreamland, Part 2. Translator, Trans-En Editor, Trans-En. "Beef stew soup noodles for two, here you go." The restaurant owner placed 2 bowls in front of him, exhilarated and gleeful. He even gave the table another quick wipe. Apparently, he believed that the arrival of the Martialist had enlightened his simple premises, for Garcia was, after all, a celebrity in the apartment. "Thank you. Can we also have a fried egg, please?" Roland drew out 2 sets of chopsticks. "One for each." "No problem. If I were you, I would definitely not pick this place to eat breakfast with a lady." Garcia rolled her eyes. "No wonder you're still single." This is slander, thought Roland. If he wasn't such an honorable man and above flirting with the gods' punishment witches, they would have taken him long ago. Zero has to go to school later, and I need to bring her breakfast." "If it's too far." "I understand. That's why I say this shouldn't be regarded as an example." Garcia interrupted him. She split the disposable chopsticks and mixed the green onions and beef together. Soon the soup noodles turned an appealing brownish-red color. She first blew on the noodles to cool it down and then slurped them as if they were long, flowing ribbons. The slurping sound made Roland's mouth water. Wow. Roland twitched his lips. You know how to eat fast food pretty well. I thought you weren't used to this kind of street food. That's just your assumption. Garcia shrugged. I've been here for almost 10 years and have tried every restaurant around this area. It's just basic manners for a host to pick a relatively decent restaurant. Plus, I don't like being stared at by strangers all the time. Roland now noticed that not only did customers in the restaurant look in this direction from time to time, but random passers-by as well. Apparently, Garcia's distinctive gray hair and toned body attracted a lot of people's attention. Oops. I forgot about that. So let's get down to business. Garcia cast him a cold glance. Why did you suddenly need to see me? The Martialist Association won't help you with anything illegal. Roland wondered why she was so alarmed. He had just returned from the headquarters yesterday and did not do anything illegal. Was there anything more illegal than the hunting license? Roland hesitated for a while before answering Garcia's question. I want to meet your master. Can you book an appointment for me? Huh? For a moment, Garcia did not follow him. Your master. Ms. Lon. Roland soon made an excuse. I feel regretful for bailing on her last time, so I want to apologize to her in person. Garcia studied him with great interest as if he were a stranger to her. Then she waved away Roland's request and said, Really? Now you know how important to have my master as a reference. Save it. She won't see you anymore. Perhaps Ms. Lon doesn't hate me as much as you imagine. Do you want to tell me that she was nice to you at the orientation? Garcia said carelessly, Get over with yourself. You've missed the chance I once gave you. My master will never waste her time on a person who doesn't even abide by the basic etiquette of punctuality, not to mention meeting them. Regardless, make a call first. Roland insisted. Garcia seemed to notice something. You don't really want to make an apology to her, do you? If I can learn some training methods for martialists from her, that would be even better. Roland managed to keep a straight face. Garcia twitched her lips. She was about to dissuade Roland from pursuing such an unrealistic idea, but she, in the end, picked up her cell phone. By the way, what's your master's number? You can't get through anyway. You have to get a SIM card from the association to connect to the headquarters. Garcia gestured him to keep silent and then spoke to the person at the other end of the line. Hello, it's me. But she hung up within 3 minutes. I knew it. You knew what? That she would refuse. She even reproached me for calling her again. Garcia grunted. She's completely disappointed in you. Her tone dropped by at least an octave when she heard your name. Roland was surprised at the unexpected result and did not understand why. Based on the attitude of Lon toward him at the orientation, she had seemingly not been very angry with him for standing her up for the first appointment. Instead, she had thought quite highly of him. Roland had felt her use of a hidden language was a demonstration of her excellent skills of applying the force of nature, so it did not surprise him that Garcia knew little about it. Now he wondered if he had been hallucinating. At first, Roland had not been very eager to solve the mystery. Even after he entered the dream world, he was hesitating, but the little defeat just now made him decide to get to the bottom of it. Oh, well. Roland took a small sip of the soup. So when can we visit the headquarters again? After you can deal with the erosion yourself and officially become a martialist. You're as green as grass at the moment. Roland thought this requirement was reasonably straightforward to meet, but he managed to not reveal his thoughts. I'm looking forward to that day. By the way, do you still remember the opening speech of Ms. Lon when we arrived at the underground hall? What about it? She said the Battle of Divine Will is around the corner. What does that mean? Well, Garcia replied resignedly. My master is very fond of a book written 50 years ago, by the name of Raison d'être. She recommended it to me, too. The book develops some theories on how a civilization emerges and evolves. The author calls it the deity's choice. This deity isn't a personified character, but actually a rule, or rather the purpose for the continuity of everything. But these theories are too abstract for people in this world, and they have nothing to do with us. As the book is only circulated in the Martialist Association, few people know about it. Garcia's answer alarmed Roland. Without a doubt, it was a book he had never seen before, which meant it was a creation of the dream world itself. Can I take a look at it? The book is in the headquarters. I can borrow it from the library next month when I report my work. Garcia glanced at Roland curiously. If I still remember. Noticing that Garcia was starting to be suspicious of his motives, Roland wolfed down the noodles and excused himself. He breathed a long sigh after waking up from the dream world the following day. Everything in the dream world seemed to be normal when it was not associated with the Martialist Association, but anything that involved the association appeared to be sketchy. Although the investigation this time did not go well, it was not wholly fruitless. One big success was that the gods' punishment witches, who had waited for so long, had once again been able to gain various physical sensations in the dream world. Seeing them have a good time, Roland felt the trip was worthwhile. Roland was about to take advantage of his recovery to have a few more trips to the dream world to get things moving faster when Lightning suddenly flew into his tent with a swallow-tailed eagle under her arm. "Your Majesty, your express mail," the little girl mumbled. "It's an encrypted letter from Neverwinter. Directly from the Western region? This isn't a short trip. Did anything happen in Neverwinter?" To save on messengers, regular mail such as reports on governmental affairs were typically sent to the Old King's City by water and forwarded by Theo and his men to him. A swallow-tailed eagle was the largest among all the animal messengers, and it required the highest power. The good thing about using a swallow-tailed eagle to deliver mail was that the animal was at the top of the food chain and it was relatively secure. The drawback of this method was that it would consume a significant amount of the witch's power. It was relatively hard for Honey to control such a fierce bird, due to the energy required for a swallow-tailed eagle was 3 times that of a gray eagle. Roland stroked the limp animal messenger and took the sealing ring off its claws. He stood rooted to the ground the moment he unfolded the letter. "The demon's army has appeared in the barbarian land?" This was earlier than he had anticipated. Chapter 9:11, The Gleaming Star of Doom. 4 days later, Roland had assembled all the leading staff that was campaigning Hermes and the northern region. An emergency meeting was held in the First Army's campground within the suburbs of the Holy City. Despite everyone feeling the great urgency of the meeting, no one panicked. Both the general staff and the military officers of the Western campaign were making conjectures as to whether His Majesty had had new plans in mind. The murmuring of the discussion did not cease until the king entered the tent with a long face. "I call a meeting, to those present." Roland tapped the desk. "We must return to Neverwinter at once." A commotion between the staff instantly broke out after this curt announcement. Ever since Roland had first received the encrypted letter, he had his doubts. The source of this information was questionable at best. Although the news was shocking, there was not a single shred of solid evidence corroborating Lorgar Burnflame's statement. There weren't even any details about when and how she encountered these demons. The threat of an entire demon army couldn't be ignored, however their whereabouts are still unknown and there would still be unrest in this region if the current operation changed dramatically. Roland remained hesitant. Waiting a few days however, Roland received no shortage of rattled animal messengers that directly flew from the western region. There must be no doubt a state of emergency has been declared in Neverwinter. The letters confirmed this. He had details about Lorgar's injuries, the demon in delirium and the problems extended to internal conflict with the arrival of Sleeping Island witches. These letters should have been arriving at his desk chronologically, where the most recent mail should have been the last to reach him. The reality, however, was a complete reverse. The messages that had the most urgency also used some of the largest birds. As a consequence, he had received the most recent encrypted mail first. After reading all the letters, Roland had developed a rough idea of what had happened. He had learned from the third encrypted letter that Lorgar had actually used Lightning's map to locate Tequila ruins, intending to train herself and improve her combat skills by fighting demons and large demonic beasts. After talking to Lightning, he had confirmed the validity of the news. And at the same time showed a favorable impression towards the wolf girl's persistence. Roland wondered if he had been too harsh on her when they first met. Fortunately, Lorgar had survived with the help of Nightfall's seed of symbiosis. With the statements Lorgar has given, if he returned to Neverwinter in late autumn, his enemies would have already established themselves on the barbarian land. This is indeed a great piece of intelligence. Roland thought she even deserved a special award for the service of Neverwinter. Maybe he should also fulfill her dream of becoming a top-notch warrior and equip her with a full set of heavy weapons. That sort of support would further her combat development immensely. That's the situation we're in now. Roland relayed the key information of the encrypted letters to the people on the floor and surveyed the audience gravely. We have to suspend our current plans in this region. As of today, all companies should start making preparations for a retreat. I'll withdraw first and restore the situation in Neverwinter as fast as possible. Tensions in the room increased dramatically. Most of the people on the floor had heard about demons and knew full well that they were the biggest enemies to the entirety of Grey Castle and a threat to mankind. Despite being knowledgeable about the rumors, none of them actually faced a demon. The leading staff was not quite sure on how to deal with the current situation, and the whole tent fell deadly silent. Roland understood that the news caught everyone off guard. They needed time to adjust to the matter at hand. After quite a long silence, one of the officers of the general staff, Sir Eltek, raised his hand. Your Majesty, can we trust the information we're getting? It isn't easy to forge Soraya's mark or Honey's animal messenger, Roland answered positively. Although I haven't double-checked yet, I think we can treat the situation as a special case because after all, it isn't easy to handle matters with demons. True, but what about matters with the Kingdom of Dawn? The Duke of Evernight asked the most important question. We'll save him for sure. Grey Castle won't abandon any of its allies. Roland cast a glance at Andrea, who looked pretty worried. The King of Dawn will have to pay for what he's done. The Wrath of Wimbledon might be late, but it'll come sure enough. I'll make other arrangements, however the First Army won't be involved. Nobody raised objections after seeing Roland's determination. The general staff was thus ordered to draft a proposal for the troops. The First Army was familiar with an emergency operation. The troops knew the objective at hand. They could launch an attack and retreat in an orderly manner. Therefore, Roland wasn't too worried that he's leaving control. The secondary city hall in the northern region, supervised by Duke Kant, would be responsible for the provision of supplies and allocate staff to the new and old holy cities. Isabella, together with the new committee of nuns and the garrison in the northern region, would stay behind until the transfer was completed so that the dregs of the church would not have the opportunity to resurge. The Hermes Plateau had been thus successfully annexed to Roland's territory. As to the new committee named by Roland, he had been instilled with a new doctrine of ideas that pushed for loyalty towards him and eased pressure off the witches. Roland believed he would leave the assessment of the organization to the future and decide whether it could replace the previous church and function as a tool of political propaganda to help with his ruling at some point later. His current top priority was to re-establish the order in the Holy City so that it would not be a deserted land before the arrival of the Battle of Divine Will. These policies had indeed been more or less implemented before he had received the encrypted letters. Now he just had to expedite the process. The only thing he needed to do now was to continue the war against the Kingdom of Dawn, but with different means. After the meeting, Roland asked Andrea to stay. Without the support of the First Army, we'll need a change of plan. He went straight to the point. Please don't worry. Princess Tilly and the witches from Sleeping Island will make sure nothing happens to Neverwinter. The blonde witch comforted him, although she looked a little apprehensive. You've done your best. You don't need to force yourself if you really can't. You're wrong, Roland shook his head. Without the First Army, we can opt for another solution I had in mind. Do you think Appen Moya's castle and knights can save him if I aim for his head? And, if we forego the open battle, we can even probably save Luashi as well. If this goes to plan, we can overthrow the king and take control of the region much quicker than we had originally anticipated. Faster? Andrea was confused. Are you planning to? I am. Roland curled up his lips. It won't be easy to persuade them, for they're now so close to having their final confrontation with their lifetime enemies, the demons. Roland paused for a moment. 50 god punishment witches are as powerful as 50 extraordinaries. You can never underestimate them even in the Age of the Union. Nobody but I can stop their effectiveness in a battle. Neither God's stones of retaliation nor the swords of knights can effectively protect them. Appin is living on borrowed time. Chapter 9:12 An idealist, I. Dealing with the King of Dawn never posed a real problem for me. The real problem lies in maintaining order in the Kingdom of Dawn. You should know very well that it isn't our intention to pick another Moya, or a person who favors the royal family as the subsequent sovereign. Roland looked directly into Andrea's eyes and continued, I thought my interference would justify this political movement, but now I'm afraid the three families have to come forward and take over from here. It was pretty obvious that someone had to be there to clean up the mess after Appin Moya fell from power. As the reputation of the King of Grey Castle and his impregnable First Army was a powerful deterrent to all the nobles, even if Earl Quinn did become the regent of the kingdom, the nobles would naturally believe he was the puppet controlled by the Wimbledon family. Under the new plan, an intervention from Grey Castle had become impossible. Since the gods' punishment witches were not politically involved, Roland had to carry out his plan in the name of the three families, otherwise, the diplomatic battle would turn into a revengeful assassination, which Roland wanted to avoid. The new plan would bring the Quinn family both upsides and downsides. The downside of it was that the Quinns would become the target of criticism, whereas the upside was the potential increase in their reputation and prestige. If Earl Quinn could take this opportunity and successfully exercise control over the City of Glow, he would have a chance to elevate himself from regent to the new King of Dawn. It was definitely a trade that would bring more benefits than harm to Earl Quinn, especially considering his actual personal qualities and influence over the region. Andrea quickly understood the key implications after a ponderous moment. But then you'll gain little from this new plan. Better than Appin continuing to plot against me. At least, it can save Otto's life. Roland did not approve or deny. Like I said earlier in the meeting, I won't abandon anyone who has made a contribution to Grey Castle that easily. I see. The anxious look on Andrea's face gave way to a look of gratitude. Miss Edith is right. You're truly a kind king. What? Roland was taken by surprise. Edith Kant? What did she say? Well, she predicted that you would save Lord Otto before we marched for the war. In fact, I probably wouldn't have decided so quickly if the Pearl of the Northern Region hadn't advised me to do so. Really? Roland managed to keep a straight face while nodding nonchalantly. Well, since you've made up your mind, I'll write a letter to Earl Quinn detailing the operation procedure and alliance with Grey Castle. Also, although most people would make the right choice under such circumstances, I want his consent to be guaranteed. Therefore, I need you to go to the City of Glow with the gods' punishment witches to make sure he does what I told, and follows operation procedure. To be completely honest, I trust you not your father, so I have to ask you to hang in there for a bit longer. Once the problem is solved, you can come back to Neverwinter with the witches. Relieved, Andrea once again exuded her dignity as a noble. She lifted her skirt and dipped in a curtsy. I certainly cannot turn down your request, after all, you've done so much for us already. Also, I have a letter for Princess Tilly and hope you can forward it to her. Naturally. Roland agreed smilingly. After Andrea withdrew, Nightingale frowned. What the heck is she doing? Are you talking about Edith? Roland stroked his chin. They probably brought up that matter during a chat. After all, both of them were present at the pre-operation meeting. What, you didn't think she would view me as a nice person? I don't think she'd say anything good about you even if you were the best man in the world. Nightingale shrugged. She doesn't seem like the sort of person who talks about things like kindness. Roland was about to say something in reply when the guards outside the tent suddenly lifted the curtain and reported to him. "Your Majesty, Lady Edith Conte requests to see you." "Oh ho, things are becoming a little interesting now." He exchanged a look with Nightingale before instructing the guard. "Send her in." "As you wish, Your Majesty." The Pearl of the Northern Region performed a bow unceremoniously after she entered the tent. "Your Majesty, I wish for you to change your plan and stop interfering with the affairs of the Kingdom of Dawn." Roland drew his brows together. "You should have brought that up during the meeting if you wanted to say something. Now I've already made the decision, and it would reflect poorly on me if I change it again." "That's why I come to see you alone after the meeting," Edith said slowly. "You can still carry out your plan but with some small adjustments. In this way, people will think it's due to some unforeseen circumstances that the mission has not been completed as planned. At the same time, you'll still be able to keep to your word." At these words, Nightingale could not hold back anymore. She revealed herself and confronted Edith directly. "What exactly are you plotting? You asked Andrea to turn to His Majesty for help. Now you want us to stop interfering in the affairs of the Kingdom of Dawn. Don't tell me that there are no conspiracies going on here." Normally, people would feel embarrassed or hesitant when someone pointed out their contradictory behaviors, but Edith remained unflappable as if she had known this would happen. "The situation has changed," she answered calmly. "You can detect lies, can't you? So you should know that I'm telling the truth. State your reason." Roland was intrigued. "The unstoppable pincer attack would make your name known to the whole Kingdom of Dawn. Even if Earl Quinn becomes the regent, civilians would know who the real ruler of the country is. When the demons aren't a threat, you can slowly exert your influence over the policies of the Kingdom of Dawn and gradually convert it to your territory. As people fear the powerful First Army, you could have easily achieved this effortlessly. However, your advantage is now gone." Edith drew up her hair and explained methodically, "The entry of the army of Grey Castle to the city and the coup perpetrated by Earl Quinn are two completely different stories. The latter would largely increase the Earl's authority in the region. As for whether other nobles would choose to submit to his rule or plot against him, it'll be none of your business." "Then we just let App and Moya continue to conspire against Grey Castle?" Nightingale questioned. "Even if your Majesty doesn't do anything, it would be hard for Appin to keep his throne. At least, he can't call his bannermen anymore. After the battle in the Old Holy City, Appin's authority and integrity are being called into question, so he's no longer able to rule the state like he used to. The Kingdom of Dawn will soon descend into chaos." Edith's tone was so flat as if she were merely laying out the facts. "During this political chaos, Earl Quinn still has a chance to win the Game of Thrones, but his influence will definitely be limited. Moreover, if Otto Luashi is lucky, he'll survive. Even if he doesn't in the end, Andrea won't blame you because it isn't your fault, Your Majesty," she stressed. Andrea must have also thought about that. That was why she reminded Roland that you'll gain little from this plan. Roland knew it very clearly as well. However, he attached greater importance to a reliable ally than personal gains. Even if Earl Quinn would not give him full support, he believed the upcoming Battle of Divine Will would eventually eliminate all the misunderstanding and mistrust between people. When there is an enemy that threatens the very survival of human civilization, the most important thing they should think about is how to jointly eradicate the enemy. The Pearl of the Northern Region should know what their top priority was, for as far as Roland could tell, she was definitely not a short-sighted person. If she did let her lust for power cloud her judgment, Roland would be truly disappointed. Chapter 913, An Idealist, 2. Roland gazed at Edith after disclosing his thoughts. "Do you really think it would be better to leave the Kingdom of Dawn as it is than have it ruled by Earl Quinn?" Edith looked as if she had already known Roland would ask that. "In fact, I don't think the two choices would be much of difference in a short term. A reliable ally can provide you with resources, people, and assistance in the Battle of Divine Will. You can trust Earl Quinn since you've got his daughter Andrea, but you can't say anything about other nobles." She admitted that? Roland was now confused, wondering what the short term she referred to meant. He had thought Edith would focus on the untrustworthiness of the nobles to establish her argument. On the other hand, if the Kingdom of Dawn sinks into a state of chaos, in order to re-establish order, a war would be inevitable. The kingdom would definitely be weakened in wartime and the state would inevitably fail. By that time, refugees and deserted lands would be all that is left in the Kingdom of Dawn, just like the eastern region and the southern territory in Grey Castle. You can obtain these lands' populations effortlessly, and unlike the first choice, these people would belong to you forever. But didn't you just say that an ally can provide not only population but also resources and assistance for the war effort? Nightingale questioned agitatedly. How does it make sense to you that one benefit is the same as three? Besides, has it never occurred to you that those refugees would die of hunger or exposure to the elements during relocation? Edith instantly shot back. It seems that 3 sounds certainly more promising than 1, but there's a condition. In order to make full use of the Allies' resources, His Majesty would first have to make some investments, for example, a steam engine, golden tools, and even ammunition and weapons. Without these, the Kingdom of Dawn has nothing to compete against demons with, let alone supporting Grey Castle on the battlefield. It's a significant investment, although with quite a high return. However, we can't just ignore such a sumptuous amount of money when we can barely satisfy the need of Neverwinter itself. Therefore, I hold that the benefits of the 2 plans are approximately the same. Roland raised his brow. He knew very few people in Grey Castle understood risk and reward in investing. Berev, for instance, would definitely refuse to provide his own technologies and products to support a neighboring country. Then why do you think leaving the Kingdom of Dawn as it is would be a better option if there's no big difference in gains? Because of witches, Your Majesty. Edith's answer surprised both Roland and Nightingale. Witches? Roland was stunned. The Pearl of the Northern region stuck out one finger. Yes. Please think it over. If witches are no longer persecuted in the new Kingdom of Dawn, or rather, under the influence of Andrea, Earl Quinn starts to follow your example and hire witches to help with the production and construction of the country, newly awakened witches facing no death threats, would stop moving to Grey Castle. This is one of the potential losses. Second, the Kingdom of Dawn is geographically more advantageous than Grey Castle. Witches in the Kingdom of Wolfheart and the Kingdom of Everwinter would move south in the event of demon invasion or persecution from the dregs of the Church. However, once the situation in the Kingdom of Dawn is stabilized, will they still move to Grey Castle? The answer is no. It's probable that the number of witches in the neighboring countries would exceed that in Grey Castle in several decades. I'm actually more concerned about this than the loss of current witches. Isn't it good that everybody lives a happy life? What are you so concerned about? Nightingale's voice was less provoking than before. Edith ignored Nightingale but directly looked into Roland's eyes. Has it ever occurred to you that one, or several witches with incredible abilities, would instantly make one kingdom outstrip another? A witch like Anna? That's right. Anna, Agatha, and Soraya, they all have incredible abilities. The moment you won their support, Neverwinter surpassed the domains of other nobles. This is also why you've achieved such great accomplishments so far. Edith said slowly, apart from that, you have a wider breadth of knowledge and greater wisdom than anyone else. As long as you're still the king and no one leaves the Witch Union, few could challenge Grey Castle's position, except demons. Edith paused for a few seconds at these words. But what about the future in over 100 years when the government of the neighboring countries operates the same way as Grey Castle's and when witches are employed in various areas? The knowledge you wrote would inevitably spread to cities and towns outside Neverwinter. By that time, people will study the method of machine manufacturing and learn everything you've taught them. If there's one single awakened witch in the Kingdom of Dawn possessing an irreplaceable ability, Grey Castle would probably fall behind. Nightingale immediately attempted to refute Edith's theory, but she swallowed her words halfway. Plus, you now largely rely on various magic powers such as Anna's ability to carry out your construction and development plan. Can you guarantee, however, that Anna's power is the farthest a witch can go? Edith stressed each syllable with due strength. If a new witch possesses a more ingenious ability than Anna, will the future King of Dawn still view Grey Castle as his ally? Roland almost wanted to applaud her speech. Edith was not focusing on immediate gains but was actually envisioning a scenario in the distant future. Ordinary people may only foresee changes in a few years' time, but Edith was picturing what would happen a century later. Furthermore, Roland somehow sensed an upcoming explosion of technological innovations in her speech. As a person who had learned about the history of the Industrial Revolution, Roland knew very well that major technological changes expedited over the past few hundred years. It took apes thousands of years to learn how to make fire, but it took only a decade for human beings to enter the information age from the steam age. A person living in the modern society might experience technological changes that would otherwise take thousands of years in the past. Now, the presence of witches might further shorten the interval between each technological change, and the emergence of one or two powerful witches might bring a new technological revolution. Edith was right. If Anna had awakened in the City of Glow, Roland would have no idea how far he could go. Roland could almost foresee what the future would look like when the members of the Witch Union gradually entered their years of decrepitude while new powerful witches appeared in the Kingdom of Dawn. This was also the reason Edith insisted on leaving the Kingdom of Dawn, as it was if Roland was not able to get full control over it. Roland believed if he were a lord born in this world, he would have definitely been convinced by Edith just now. All kings wanted their kingdoms to endure through time, and for their descendants to perpetuate their glory. They would never create a rival that would potentially pose a threat to their own country. Roland could still change his mind and abandon Otto to his fate. To do that, he just needed to break his promise and deceive Andrea. However, he was not that kind of person. It wasn't the country that Roland really cared about. He did not care about what his kingdom would look like after his death. Compared with an everlasting kingdom, he was more interested in the advancement of the entire human race. No matter who his successor was, Roland did not have an obligation to assist him in ruling the state. His life goal in this world was to improve the standard of living in Grey Castle and take it to the next level while at the same time unveiling the mystery of the battle of divine will. As for which of the four kingdoms was the strongest, he would leave the choice to people living here. Last but not least, he wanted to stick to his principles of being an honest and righteous man. He realized that he could never easily break his words for personal gains, nor could he lie in negotiations. His instant resistance to Edith's proposal made him understand that he would never truly become an outstanding politician. An excellent argument. Roland looked at Edith with satisfaction. However, I won't take my words back. Your Majesty, Edith was surprised. I know what you want to say. You want to say that a wise king should always seek the best interests of his country and that it's normal to cheat. Roland interrupted Edith. But there are rulers in this world other than kings. Other rulers? Edith echoed in confusion. That's right. For example, an idealist. Chapter 9:14, Anna's prediction. After taking care of the affairs regarding the Kingdom of Dawn, Roland returned to his mansion deep down the campsite. The manor, which consisted of several attached two-story stone houses, a huge front yard, and a backyard, used to belong to a wealthy merchant. Since its original owner went missing during the Hermes riot, Roland used it as his temporary residence. When he entered the master bedroom, he found Anna sitting at his desk reading the book he had retrieved from the dream world. The sunlight that fell through the window blazed off her bangs and gilded her pale face with a rim of gold. Is the meeting over? Hearing his footsteps, Anna turned around and asked him happily. Yes, I told them everything they should know. Nana and the others will take off first thing in the morning. Have a foot bath first. Anna rose and put a water basin on the stool next to the bed. She then helped Roland take off his shoes and socks. The boots Roland wore on the plateau were made of sturdy leather, quickly giving him sore, smelly feet. Therefore, the first thing Roland did after work was to take a foot bath and put on a pair of light, soft shoes. At first, he insisted on doing it himself, but Anna was determined to help and refused to take no for an answer. How's the temperature? Anna put her black fire into the water and let it sink to the bottom. Maybe a little hotter than this. Ah, that's perfect. Feeling the warmth wash over his feet, Roland sighed deeply. Apart from heating up the water, the black fire could also turn into a rollerball to massage the back of his feet and soles. It would then cover his feet and dry off the water residue. This is such a pampered life. What about you? Anna sat down next to him. Are you leaving with Nana? No, but Sylvie is. Her monitoring ability is irreplaceable for the garrison. Roland held Anna's hands. My return would certainly ease their minds, but they have to learn to solve problems without me. Besides, the main force of the First Army is not ready, so I would be of little use. Once Maggie transports Nana and Sylvie, she'll transport us. Since Hummingbird's ability did not apply to living beings, Maggie could only take around 2 people on her back at a time. The maximum number of people depended on the weight of each individual. Lightning could also carry 1 passenger, but she would fly much lower when loaded, almost touching the tips of the trees. Her service was thus considered not very safe for a long-haul flight but could serve as an alternative in the event of an emergency. It was a long trip from Hermes to Neverwinter. Even if Maggie continued to fly after the sunset without taking a break to search for food, it would take nearly 3 days to cover the distance. Roland had no choice but to gradually transport witches based on how urgent their tasks were needed. Fortunately, the troops would slowly advance toward the south along the inland river, which would shorten the wait time for the transportation services. If only there were a faster commute. Anna looked up. For example, a machine that soars through the sky. That isn't easy, unless, Roland was about to say that it was impossible to build a real aircraft without an internal combustion engine when an idea suddenly flashed across his mind. He instantly withdrew his previous remark and said something else instead. Hang on, that's probably doable. How? Anna's light blue eyes flickered with excitement. By using Wendy's and Mystery Moon's abilities, Roland answered meditatively. If it's an aircraft with the purpose of transportation, it might work if we combine their abilities. Roland was actually inspired by Maggie's bombing plan. If he did not pursue generalization and mass production, a lot of Witch's abilities could actually replace machines. After 3 years of research and development, he had successfully obtained light aluminum materials in Neverwinter and had also established an arithmetic academy capable of performing large-scale computing. Together with a central carrier used to verify computing results, there was a significant chance that he could build a glider that required little or no power. The most important part of this attempt was Wendy's control of the wind and an electric motor that powered Dawn Eye. Simply speaking, an aircraft can fly because its engine produces thrust that pushes the plane forward. In the meantime, a pressure differential created by the airflow on the upper and lower surfaces of the airplane wings generated a lifting force. Due to the limitations of the current technologies in Neverwinter, the electric motor presently in use was not powerful enough to lift a plane. However, Wendy's wind could provide a lifting force to the aircraft by directly creating an air pressure differential beneath the wings. In that case, the electric motor would only need to provide a horizontal thrust force. In the same way, in which lightning had adjusted the direction of bombs in the air, Wendy was required to apply moderate force to help the plane take off. To enhance the flight's duration, the glider's wings should be as long as possible. Roland became increasingly excited as he recollected what a glider looked like in modern society. But to maximize the lifting force before its takeoff, the aircraft must have a wide wing to fully embrace Wendy's wind control area. Also, a regular, well-designed glider relied on hot airflow to increase its flight altitude and enhance its flight duration. Roland's unique glider, however, would be supplied continuously with upward airflow generated by the witches. This meant that the aircraft could operate as long as Roland wanted to, provided that the magic power didn't run out. In other words, once a runway was built at the destination, the aircraft could transport at least 10 people at a time. Even the slowest glider could reach a speed of more than 200 kilometers per hour, which was 3 times faster than Maggie in the form of Devil Beast. With such a glider, they could reach any city in Grey Castle within a day. Needless to say, it would be a slow and time-consuming process to manufacture the prototype and train the pilot. Even if he started the project now, by the time the glider was launched, the witches and the First Army would have already arrived at Neverwinter. Nevertheless, the idea of inventing a glider exhilarated both Roland and Anna, who dwelled on this subject for quite a while. For human beings who came from and returned to the Earth, flying was their biggest ambition. Unlike a lame hydrogen balloon, a glider allowed people to truly soar the sky. Edith gave Roland wise advice on ruling the kingdom, whereas Anna shared his thoughts and ideas on new technologies and innovations. She was the only person capable of having a conversation with him on such an academic level. By the way, Anna carefully organized and put away the sketch of the glider and meeting notes. Was there any good news during the meeting? You haven't looked as relaxed as today ever since you received the letters from Neverwinter. Well, sort of. Roland curled up his lips into a smile and told her about his conversation with the Pearl of the Northern Region briefly. When Anna heard Edith's reasoning, she could not help bursting into laughter. What's wrong? Roland asked curiously. I want to say that she's overconfident in our learning ability. To understand everything you've taught us? I'm having a difficult time learning advanced mathematics, let alone physics and chemistry, Anna grimaced. I feel like I'll never completely understand the Orange Book even if you give me another 100 years. Haha. Roland laughed. There are many similar books in the dream world. And I don't think the future will turn out the way she thinks. Really? What do you think will happen? She thinks it's better to let the Kingdom of Dawn sink into chaos if you aren't able to secure a dominant position on the continent through a flanking attack. However, I believe there's more than one way to win people's respect. When you lead us to fight against demons and eliminate all those fearsome enemies who invade our kingdom, you'll be treated with reverence, an honor that no other king can possibly attain, Anna said in a serious tone. When you eradicate the church and win the battle of divine will, the witches would all remember your great services and the tequila witches would also be proud of you. Your name will be found in every book you've written, and you'd be permanently associated with the knowledge you've brought to the masses. You'll not only become a part of our history but will also be remembered by everybody in present time. You would enjoy such high prestige that the lords from other kingdoms would come to seek your protection and request to be under your jurisdiction. Nobody would challenge your authority because those who betrayed you have already provided an illustration of what happens when they commit treason. In the foreseeable future, there would probably be only one kingdom, with its territory reaching to the fertile plains, where mankind is vigorously reviving the glory of the human race. Anna paused for a second and then asked, "Is there anything wrong with my prediction?" Chapter 9:15, To the End of the World. Of course there isn't. Roland poked her forehead affectionately. On the contrary, I feel it's exactly something you'd dream. Why are you so happy about what Edith said then? Anna asked in bewilderment. I'm not happy about her prediction. History itself has a lot of variables and possibilities, Roland replied smilingly. It's already hard to learn from the past, let alone to predict the future. For instance, we may survive the third battle of divine will but suffer a miserable defeat in the fourth one 100 years from now. Another option is that the enemies lurking at the bottom of the ocean are too powerful for us to conquer them, causing us to be exterminated from Earth's surface. By that time, we don't even know whether the human race could persevere, not to mention the continuity of our kingdom. This is something typical for you to think about, Anna commented, mimicking Roland's tone. What makes you so happy then? Her vision on things. Roland spread out his hands. When she said something like that, she became a governmental officer rather than a regular noble with a title. A governmental officer? Anna tried to repeat the mouthful word. Correct. She wasn't speaking as an official from the northern region but as one who governs the entirety of Grey Castle. She's making policies based on the direction the entire kingdom is heading toward, which is a rare and invaluable quality for people born in this era. It's something that even Bear fails to pay attention to. As a city hall director, he always weighs pros and cons from the perspective of Neverwinter. It was indeed a game changer. From the beginning, Edith Kant, as an ordinary noble in the northern region, had been assisting the ruler in governing the state, while at the same time seeking benefits for her own local region. It was the most common mindset among local nobles. Only the territory granted to their family was what truly belonged to the noble, causing them to place their own benefits over that of the king, although they had pledged allegiance to the monarchy. Another thing is her attitude toward witches. Roland went on, it's foresightful of her to associate witches with technological revolutions and then incorporate their abilities into the development strategy. Roland knew it was entirely different to blindly follow an order than to understand the reason behind it. Although he had developed the idea of science and technology constitute a primary productive force and witches are the best driving force in his book, most City Hall officials did not really see the significance of treating witches fairly. They did so merely because it was the king's order. The public did not understand the rationale behind it either. They gradually accepted witches because of the convenience the latter brought to them. Their mutual relationship was, as a matter of fact, as delicate and fragile as a thin thread that could easily snap off upon a conflict or a misfortune. Only when people fully recognized the absolute necessity of witches would they engage more deeply. In fact, Roland was more pleased with the shift of Edith's attitude toward witches than the change in her political mindset. With the centralization of power and the diminish of feudal rights, more officials would eventually accept the concept of unity. However, it would probably take a much longer time for them to grasp the nature of the witch's abilities. Having said that, Edith was not perfect. Although she was more insightful of the future than most people, she failed to see some other possibilities besides the continued dominance of the Kingdom of Grey Castle. Her thoughts and ideology were still primarily bound by the era. Nevertheless, Edith was, after all, a young woman about the same age as Nightingale. It was thus healthy for her to have an ambition of building an everlasting empire. Roland was curious what kind of governor she would become in 20 or 30 years when she had been imbued with all sorts of modern concepts and ideas Roland was currently striving to advertise. After hearing Roland's explanation, Anna tilted her head and asked, "Since the future is unpredictable and you don't care about what Grey Castle would look like after your death, what are you planning to do if we survive the Battle of Divine Will?" "You already know, don't you?" Roland looked into her azure eyes. They had discussed their future several times when they had been cuddling in bed. Roland intended to visit the Land of Dawn across the fertile plains and even take a look at the demon's territory. He also planned to cross the Sealine and reach the other end of the ocean. Apart from that, he wanted to unveil the mystery of the deities and learn the truth of the world. To this end, Roland would use every resource available and force not only residents in the Kingdom of Grey Castle but every single person on the continent to contribute to his entrepreneurial undertaking. Anyone who attempted to stop him would be viewed as his enemy. "Remember to take me with you." Anna grinned. "I don't want to miss the adventure." "Of course. I'll definitely take you wherever I go, even to the end of the world." Roland pressed a kiss to her lips. Neverwinter and the Third Border City. Tilly stood captivated before the magic core, watching its every movement. Its outer frame dilated and contracted as the magic power rose and declined, like blue sea water as if the core was breathing. At the center of the pyramid flickered a yellow light orb. Like a gemstone washed and polished by tidal waves, the orb got Tilly's full attention. As long as the orb was illuminating, the five-colored stone would be fine. "If you feel tired, go take a rest." Pasha's voice suddenly popped up in her head. In the meantime, Tilly heard a rustle behind her. "If I notice something, I'll let you know immediately." Tilly turned around and found a huge blob drop down from the ceiling. Although all the senior witches looked the same after their conversion, she could somehow tell them apart after staying with them for a few days. "I'm not tired." "It's been just 5 days." Tilly yawned at these words. "I'm a bit drowsy, that's all." When I still felt sensations, there was no difference between those two. Pasha swayed her tentacle. "Don't worry. The magic stone is intact, which means that the witches are still safe. If they do encounter demons, they will break the stone." Tilly also knew that, but she could not find peace in her mind. She regretted staying behind and felt a little annoyed at the fact that she had been persuaded by Ash's silly argument. Technically, the operation should not be too dangerous. All the selected witches were excellent combatants who had participated in the battle against the church. The way they insinuated themselves into Demon's Lair would also be pretty much the same as that they had attacked the church at Fjords. Lotus would be responsible for creating an underground shelter, and Orbit would dig a short passage for the rest of them to travel in between two locations. With this method, the enemies would only be able to find an enclosed cave beneath the earth even if they saw something out of character. The key lay in the final step. To expand the visual field of the phantom instrument, they should break the magic stone somewhere with a relatively high altitude. Tilly had planned to locate the spot with the Stone of Flight herself, but Ashes took over her job. Tilly had confirmed through the few maneuvers before the operation that it was highly unlikely for demons to spot her if she took action at night. However, Ashes insisted that a leader should not put herself in danger. As a result, she was left behind with the magic core, unable to do anything. Chapter 9:16, A Second Trip to the Ruin. I used to be like you. Pasha suddenly broke the silence. Every time my friends went to war, I would wait at the city gate. The Union even built a high tower there for people to rest. They would know immediately if someone came back. Are you talking about Tequila? Tilly asked. Yes, but after a few years, nobody but the garrison visited there. Do you know why? Tilly did not reply, but she already knew the possible answer. Because all we got was disappointment and grief in the end. Pasha put her tentacle on Tilly's shoulder. Witches are connected through magic power. Our bond is much stronger than blood. Once we get to know each other, everyone would become our sister, no matter if she was an ordinary combat witch or a member of the Blessed Army. However, the intimate relationship also generated negative emotions on the tower. It was frustrating to see bodies be sent back from the front on the day of return. When our outer defensive line gradually shrank and nobody needed to depart for war, the Union ordered the high tower to be torn down. Are you trying to say that it's unnecessary to wait for them? Quite the opposite. I want to say that the fact that you're still longing for their return means that you haven't truly lost something, Pasha said in a slow and gentle tone. I hope you'll never turn into someone like me, who views sacrifice as the new norm. I have lost a lot of things. I made many decisions when I left the palace for Sleeping Island. A lot of them were decisions of loss and gain, and I had to abandon some of my closest friends. As long as I choose the right path, I won't hesitate. But there's someone who is different. There's always one or two people that hold a special place in my heart, who always make me restless. Tilly held the stone ring of lightning in her hand tighter. It was no problem for her to control the two magic stones alternatively, but Ashes could not even fly a straight line with the two stones. Therefore, she had to keep the ring to herself. Nevertheless, Tilly did not reveal her thoughts but simply nodded slightly. Thank you. You're welcome. I'll go check how the digging of defensive line at the border is going. There's a room with a bed near the entrance to the hall. You can sleep there if you want. Got it. After Pasha headed back the way she had come, Tilly suddenly had a cold feeling around her palm. She spread out her hand and found one corner of the magic stone fixed by the ring had come off. The fragment sank into her flesh and left a tiny bead of blood on her hand. It's been 5 days. Why haven't we seen the ruins yet? Lotus grumbled. It's so boring hiding underground all day. How do I know? In any case, I'll go wherever your tunnel is heading. A girl with braided hair shrugged. She threw a piece of dried meat into the air and then opened her mouth. With a flash of blue light, the dried meat disappeared and her cheeks puffed up. Yum. So it isn't a lie. Life in Neverwinter is indeed luxurious. Even their rations are so delicious. T-tunnel? Do you think I'm a mole? Pretty much. You'd better go easy on the food. Iffy sighed. I don't want to return with an empty stomach. I don't want to be lectured by a witch from the Bloodfang Association. The girl jerked her head away from Iffy. I've heard that you once conspired against Princess Tilly. If I were her, I wouldn't even share wheat cakes with you, let alone dried meat. Iffy rolled her eyes. Enough. Ashes cut in with a resigned look. It wasn't their fault in joining the Bloodfang Association. If Tilly heard you say this, she would definitely give you a good lesson. Oh, well. Hearing Princess Tilly's name, the witch finally became quiet. This is another witch who is too hyper for her own good. Ashes thought to herself while breathing out a sigh. This witch, who took particular attention to her appearance, was called Orbit. Despite her flamboyant style, she played an indispensable role in this operation. Orbit's ability was incredible. Before she had become of age, she could create an invisible passage connecting two locations. The passage could not be detected by the naked eye and it covered no distance. In other words, she could transfer herself from one place to another within a blink of an eye. If there was something like a wall or a door in between the two places, Orbit would act as if it didn't exist. As long as she continuously applied her ability, the passage would remain open. Nonetheless, her magic power could only affect an area within a radius of 15 meters. If she was the entrance of the passage, this number would drop to around 7. After she had entered her adulthood, Orbit had obtained a derivative skill called Magic Mark that largely increased the practicality and the coverage of the passage. The passage would be visible to a person marked by Orbit, whereas one without a mark could not stop Orbit from moving around even if he knew where the passage was. There were also certain dangers with this ability. For example, Orbit could withdraw her ability when a marked enemy was just halfway through the passage. The enemy's body would then be snapped in half and appear in two separate locations when the passageway was sealed. Tilly thus proposed that Lotus and Orbit should work together to open a secret tunnel with an invisible exit so that the enemies could not locate the witches even if they found the hole. By the time the demons realized there were many similar tunnels, the witches would already be several miles away. Hence, the operation plan was, technically, absolutely safe. Using the stone tower where Agatha had initially been found as their starting point, they left Misty Forest and headed to the northeast. As the forest close to Neverwinter was completely under Leaf's control, they did not need to worry about any threats from hybrid demonic beasts. However, Ashes soon found a practical problem they had not anticipated during their maneuver, and that was navigation. During the trip, they had only needed to cover a distance of a few kilometers. Yet when this number increased by dozens of times, it became very hard to determine which direction they were exactly heading to. Although they would use stars for orientation, nobody knew whether they were on the right track. How about checking the map Lorger brought back? Lotus turned to Ashes for advice. Perhaps we can find a couple of landmarks that would help us navigate. Then we would know how far we were from the ruin. Ashes nodded, although her hopes were not high. On the map were some bird nests, beehives and bears' caves, which offered them few clues as to where they were. Perhaps only Lightning and Maggie could read the map and find the right direction. Shoo! Iffy suddenly gestured at them to keep quiet. The three of them instantly fell silent. Soon, they heard patterings of heavy footsteps overhead. The shuffling sound indicated there were at least 4 or 5 people. Since hybrid demonic beasts rarely acted in groups, they were most likely the patrol team of demons. The footsteps soon faded away. It was obvious that the enemies did not notice someone was hiding beneath the earth. This was the second time today. The attack of the wolf girl apparently had alarmed the demons a great deal. After all the demons scurried off, Iffy let out a sigh of relief. Well, at least that tells us that we're in the right direction. But the problem is that we can't see the ruin of the city and thus can't place the light curtain at the right spot. Lotus shook her head. In order to use the phantom instrument as an alarming device, we have to put the light curtain 5 or 6 miles to the southwest of the ruin. This way, the Tequila witches would see devil beasts when they fly toward the western region. After pondering for a while, Ashes made the final decision. We'll march for another night. I'll go up and check where the Tequila ruins lay at dusk tomorrow. Chapter 917, Ashes' Plan. Ashes, the demons aren't blind. Iffy quickly refuted Ashes' suggestion. As soon as you see Tequila by the setting sun, you'll be immediately spotted. There's no place to hide in the sky. Do you want to expose yourself with no way to fight back? Iffy is right, it's too risky of a move. Lotus added. Lady Tilly told us that the stone of flight only lets you fly up and down and not laterally. Once you're discovered by them, you can't escape. Can't we at least do this at night? Ashes felt incredibly touched by all their comments, especially the one coming from Iffy. Just a year ago, she was at her neck when she was with the Bloodfang Association, and the leader of the association, Heidi Morgan, had been plotting to kill her and Tilly. If Tilly had not insisted on tolerating the Bloodfang Association, she would have waged war against them long before. Ashes had never expected Iffy to start showing concern for her, since she thought that rift between Sleeping Island and Bloodfang Association would never be completely healed. Ashes suddenly felt that she and Iffy were on the same team now. She was happy to see these changes happening. Ashes understood that teamwork was what was needed to go forward. But I can't see anything in the darkness of the night. Tequila must be covered in vines by now, and I also can't find the ruins if there's no light around. I think early dusk is the best time, Ashes insisted. And maybe we didn't go astray and the ruins are just behind some big tree or by a low hill. All I have to do is to fly up and crush the magic stone in my hand. But what if some flying demon nearby spots you? Lotus knitted her eyebrows. You'll only be able to use, at most, 10% of your strength in the air, right? Don't worry. I've already figured out a strategy to handle these problems, Ashes calmly explained while holding 3 fingers up. Depending on the situation, I'll use one of 3 different plans. Oh? Orbit came closer curiously. You sound like Lady Tilly now. Really? How do these plans of yours work? Lotus also appeared to be intrigued. Listen to me carefully, the only enemies who can discover me must be some mad demons riding flying devil beasts, so I came up with 3 different situations. A different plan if 1, 2, or more than that come to attack me. Oh my, Lotus felt helpless and covered her forehead. Bahaha, you really plan to get caught? Iffy broke into a chuckle. Hey, don't interrupt. Let me finish talking about my strategy and then you can comment. If I were Maggie, I would raise both flags in favor for you. Orbit said with seriousness. Now I know why she enjoys taking part in your plans now. In the end, Ashes managed to get everyone to hear her out. After hearing Ash's strategy, the witches agreed on her plan since none of them could think of a better one. In Lotus' view, although the 3 situations Ashes talked about in the beginning sounded a little absurd, her countermeasures were unexpectedly good. In Iffy's eyes, Ash's plan was just based on her animalistic intuition and accumulated fighting experience. After another day of traveling underground, the light coming through the vent began to dim. At first, the white clouds seemed to be hazed with a fiery red, and then they gradually melted into the evening sky. Obviously, the sun was now going down over the fertile plains and it was the time for them to act. Orbit patted Ash's back and gave her a magic mark. It was a light blue spot above her head and looked like a shimmering puddle, which made the witches feel as if they were standing underwater and looking up at the blue sky through the intermittent ripples. Ashes knew that this was not the real scene outside, but just how the magic corridor looked. After confirming that there was no demon patrol team around, she nodded to the other 3 witches and injected her magic power into the ring. An indescribable feeling came over her afterward. She felt as if an extra arm or leg was growing out on her body. Tilly described this process as getting invisible wings. It was difficult for a person who was born with no flying ability to suddenly control these wings like how birds soar through the sky. Among the Sleeping Island witches, Tilly was the only one who uses the stone of flight with ease. Ashes closed her eyes, imagined herself flapping the wings, and jumped. After a moment, the absolute silence of the underground space was replaced by a variety of sounds. She felt the fresh air blowing across her face and heard a rustle of leaves ringing beside her ears. She also heard birds tweeting, buzzing insects, and the whistling sound of the evening breeze which caressed her cheeks. She opened her eyes and saw everything clearly. Everything on the ground quickly shrunk and the exit of the magic corridor was now just a tiny spot of light. She had to admit that it was quite an experience worth trying once in a while. Ashes controlled her excitement and gazed to the north, where Tequila should be, however Ash's heart quickly sank. As Ashes looked at everything ahead of her, she did not find anything that looked like a ruin, let alone the skeleton monster mentioned by the wolf girl. She found nothing except some shrubs and meadows crimsoned by the setting sun. Did we head in a completely wrong direction? She wanted to find the impassable mountain range to help determine her location. However, when she turned around, she was stunned by the sight of massive monsters that crouched among the jungle in the southeast a few hundred meters away. Those huge things were obviously manufactured by demons, and the broken walls of the Tequila ruins stood right below them. The witches had thought that they had not yet arrived at the ruins, but now Ashes realized that they had already passed the ruins due to their accumulated deviations. If the witches drew a line from where they had started their journey to Tequila and where they were now, it would only be a few degrees between. However, in reality, such a small deviation could determine whether their location was in the front of or behind the Tequila ruins when they arrived. Ashes hesitated. If I go back now and ask the team to turn around and head south, it'll take us at least 2 or 3 days to arrive at Tequila. However, if I flew towards the ruins at the same speed as I flew up, I'd only need less than half a day to fly to the ruins to locate the place and return to the team. The only problem is that I'm only able to fly vertically. I've never tried to fly horizontally. What should I do? Before Ashes made a decision, a burst of dull horn sounds blared from Tequila. A dozen devil beasts on the back of a skeleton monster leaped up and flew toward her. Meanwhile, numerous mad demons emerged out of the earth around the ruins and closely surrounded the holy city of Tequila. Well, it seems they're quite vigilant, and there's obviously more than 3 of them. This is much worse than I imagined, Ashes thought. She took out the 5-colored stone and crushed it without any hesitation and flew directly towards the ground. For any warrior, the most important ability was to act appropriately according to the situation. She intended to capture the enemy alive if there was only 1 devil beast, eliminate all of them if there were 2, and retreat if the number of enemies numbered higher. She was never afraid to fight that many demons, however she wouldn't be able to defeat them all before more reinforcements came and endanger her whole team. As for the current situation, it was way too risky to fly to the Tequila ruins. She had to crumble the stone now, even though she did not get to an ideal position. She was not as talented as Tilly, who could control the invisible wings like using her own arms, but she had her own way of making flight faster. Ashes needed to inject more magic power into the magic stone. As the magic power grew in the stone, Ashes felt that the invisible wings on her back gradually swelled to the limit, and each imaginary flapping of them could cause a howling gale. She descended sharply from the sky at a speed which was almost 3 or 4 times faster than when she flew up. Under such circumstances, even the precise spear throwers of the mad demons couldn't hit her. The only problem was that inertia was too great to overcome at such extremely fast speeds. Because of the limited depth of the magic corridor, Lotus could only create an empty hole, which was at most as deep as 5 or 6 meters. Within such a short distance, she could hardly stop the downward momentum by herself. All Ashes could do was to put some faith in her teammates. After several seconds of falling, Ashes saw a small blue light appearing on the ground. That's the magic corridor. She folded her hands and put them on her head while tightening the muscles all over her body. The moment she penetrated straight into the magic corridor, she saw several purple lights emerge out of the air and firmly grasp her. It was Iffy's magic cage. In an instant, the cage stopped her from falling rapidly, and when she completely stopped, she found that there was just an arm's length between her head and the bottom of the hole. "You're really heavy," said Iffy, her hands clutching the cage. She shrugged and added, "Now, do you know where we are?" "Of course, but let's not discuss about this right now." Ashes looked at Orbit. "Retreat to the misty forest right now. The demons are coming." Chapter 918, The Only Definite Thing. 3 days had passed. Tilly was walking around anxiously until she saw the 4 witches when her mind was finally put at ease. Judging from their dirty faces and forced smiles, she could easily tell that their trip must have been filled with accidents and risks. Fortunately, they were safe and lucky enough to escape from the demon army after being discovered by them. Tilly was about to say some words of comfort, but after seeing Ash's unapologetic face, she became upset and began to reprimand the extraordinary, albeit slyly. I've never expected that a person who boasted of experiencing hundreds of battles in the wilderness would get lost, Princess Tilly satirized. Tell me how you managed to get from Hermes to King City and not just wander into the southernmost region? This is unlike what you've shown me. Well, there were so many church people chasing me at that time. Every time I was lost, I would catch one of them and have him tell me where the correct direction was. Ashes shrugged. And we didn't deviate too far away from the planned route this time. At least, we could still see the Tequila ruins. If the demon army hadn't gone into action, I would have been able to see. Without adequate red mist, they'll never send out all their troops. We sent you to gather information about the enemy since we need to guard against the devil beast's surprise attacks. But when you crushed the magic stone, we could only see the demon army from behind and at a very bad angle. Everyone is back safe and sound. It's the ideal outcome. Besides, the angle isn't that bad, Pasha interjected. His Majesty Roland has sent back the first batch of witches from the north and Sylvie was among them. With her, our scouting ability will be greatly improved. And we've seen the enemy's rear, which will help us to judge the scale of the enemy's main force and reinforcements. You can go back and have had a good rest first. Oh? We got messages from the northern region? Ashes raised her eyebrows and asked. Yeah, lucky for you. If these messages didn't come you wouldn't have easily gotten away with this. Tilly snorted. Well. Excuse me, I have to go now. Wait. Ashes looked at Pasha with a vague smile and then hurriedly caught up with Tilly. Is there anything else you want to tell me? No, nothing, let's just head back. Ashes twitched her mouth and said. After they returned to the witch building, Ashes wrapped her arms around Tilly from behind when the princess closed the door. I'm so sorry, I worried you and Dash. Did Pasha tell you to do this? Tilly asked without turning around. How'd you know? Ashes was slightly startled. I clearly see it on your face. She broke away from Ash's arms. I'm guessing that Pasha told you that I didn't have any good rest these past few days and that I've stayed around the magic core most of the time. She must have told you to forgive my bad mood and to try your best to comfort me since I'm exhausted. Amazing, to think you could guess all of that. Ashes stood astonished. So, could you apologize to me first? Tilly turned around. What? No. The extraordinary shook her head. No? Tilly glared. So, you think it's right to worry me? There should be no problem, you're not in any danger. And that's all I need for a decision. Ashes, you don't understand. Tilly was furious. Any risk can be calculated, measured, and evaded. The person who performs the task is also included in the calculation. If the person isn't good at the task, even a perfect plan will be ruined. Do you understand? If it was me, the situation would never become so dangerous. Calculate, measure, evade. You sound more and more like Roland Wimbledon now. Ash shrugged and said. Don't divert the topic. Princess Tilly remained unmoved. Isn't it true? But there's always risk. And I want to be the one to take it, even if accidents are likely to happen. After all, I've already had countless accidents in my life. Ashes, who was much taller than the princess, bent forward and put her hands on Tilly's shoulders so that their eyes were level. Listen, I have a very good reason to not apologize to you. Now that we've decided to stay here to fight demons, I'll have to take more chances to risk my life and go to dangerous places. One day, I may be unable to come back and I don't want to owe you lots of apologies. Hey, don't pull this on me. Listen to me please, Tilly, Ashes said seriously. I'm not as talented as your brother and it's too difficult for me to think about things like the future of witches. So taking risks is the only thing I'm good at. If you're determined to return to the sleeping island now, I'll immediately promise you that I'll never let you worry about me, but I can't guarantee that here. I would never ask you to apologize to me if you make me worried. Tilly was speechless. She looked into Ash's golden eyes and felt that this black-haired witch in front of her seemed to be more reliable than ever before. No, Ash's is talking nonsense. Tilly denied it in her heart. Ahem, she turned her head aside and said. I guess I can forget about this incident for now, but you have to tell me about the whole thing later. Now go take a shower. You stink. All right. Ash's breathed a sigh of relief. Do you want to take a bath together with me? No, not now. Tilly grumbled. Tilly watched the extraordinary leave and then lifted her right hand to check a tiny wound. On her right palm, there was a spot which was pricked by a ring. It was already healed, but the pain was still fresh in her memory. Fortunately, the worst didn't happen. Perhaps I'm thinking too much. When Lorgar woke up from her long slumber, she felt an incredibly comfortable sensation in her body. It felt as if she was soaking herself in a warm spring and was completely free of dizziness and pain. Yes, I remember now. It was Nana Pine. The wolf girl vaguely recalled something had happened before her sleep. Nana had run into her bedroom while panting. The lovely, little girl had probably got back in a hurry without any rest. The first sentence she heard from Nana was "Have a good sleep now. You'll be all right when you wake up." She also remembered that she had seen her friends from the exploration group, who had uttered many words besides her bed. However, her mind went blank when she tried to remember what they said back then. The feeling of Nana's magic power flowing through her body was so wonderful that she had forgotten almost everything. So I'm fully recovered now? I should express my thanks to Nana, Lorgar thought. Unexpectedly, after she opened her eyes, the first person she saw was a gray-haired man. She was stunned. Great, Chief? It's me. Roland nodded. How do you feel now? I don't know how to describe it. She tried to move her finger. It was still clumsy, but she managed. I think I'm fine. How long have I slept? Where's Nana? And, what are you doing with your hand? Oh, this? I just thought that they looked interesting, I hope you don't mind. Roland stopped touching Lorgar's wolf ears and took his hand back. I've been curious about how they feel like. Do you feel, well, ticklish when I touched them? No, they're just ears, Lorgar was surprised and said. You can touch them if you want. I'm fine with it if you don't mind them. With these words, the wolf girl wiggled her long ears. Chapter 919, Repay the Great Chief's Kindness. Now will you admit that I'm qualified to fight the demons? Lorgar felt refreshed all of a sudden. I've never denied your ability to fight against them. In fact, even an ordinary woman who's unable to tie up a chicken will end up being involved in this mighty war, albeit behind the main defensive line. Roland reiterated his concern. I only objected to your desire to fight them by yourself. If the Sleeping Island witches had come any later, without Nightfall's seed of symbiosis, you would have been buried in the Western Zone cemetery by now. But if I hadn't gone that deep into the barbarian lands, Neverwinter would never have received the news about the incoming demon army, Lorgar retorted. I can reward you for a good result, but I still wouldn't ever approve of your wrong behavior because of it. Roland shook his head. What I'm happiest about in your actions this time is you're bringing the message back to Neverwinter instead of fighting the enemies alone in the barbarian lands. Even if you were to ask me this same question again, I would give you the exact same answer. No, I don't want you to go to fight the demons by yourself. I'll ask the sentries to step up vigilance from now on, in the case that you might someday come back to the city more dead than alive. What? This is the Great Chief's command. Roland remained unmoved. Let's talk about your reward first. Well, Lorgar found that the look on the Great Chief's face was far more serious now than when he had been touching her ears. That's fine. There are 3 types of rewards. You may choose between gold royals, chaos drinks, or a piece of equipment custom made for you. The first 2 choices are easy to understand, but what's the last one? Is it some kind of iron claw or steel tusk for me to use in my wolf form? I had previously considered obtaining this kind of weapon back in the Wildflame clan. However, when I transform back into a girl, these weapons that are inconvenient to carry will become a burden for me. Lorgar thought to herself. She raised this question to Roland. I don't have a specific design for the weapon in mind right now, but I can tell you that it'll be a mighty firearm that can dramatically improve your combat capability, Roland explained. Ashes told me that you could transform selective parts of your body into their wolf form while in your human form, and that in this half-animal form you would have half of the strength of a god's punishment warrior. Since this equipment is specifically designed for the god's punishment witches, I think it'll also suit you. This firearm mentioned by Roland reminded her of the fierce weapons used by the First Army to destroy the Oasis watchdog. She remembered that lightning also had such a weapon. It was indeed powerful, but it also depended on the operator's skill. More importantly, she knew that it used a very special kind of bolt that could only be produced by Neverwinter. She believed that the Great Chief would never give her any of these bolts, as he would never allow her to leave the city on her own. Without these bolts, this firearm could only be placed at home as a showpiece and would not give her much help. After all, it was just a weapon. Compared to this external force, she had more faith in her own teeth and claws. After a little thought, Lorgar said, "Can I choose to join the Witch Union?" This choice was completely beyond Roland's expectations. He was surprised and replied, "Yes, you can, but earlier you told me that." "I changed my mind." The wolf girl wagged her tail. "Both the gold royals and the chaos drinks will be used up one day, and I've no other special skills besides my fighting ability, so I think I'd better join the Witch Union. As a member of the union, I'll get gold royals and free drinks every month, right?" "Well, yes, that's right. In addition, I promised Lightning and Maggie that I'll explore all of the barbarian lands together with them. Since both of them are members of the Witch Union, it'll be more convenient for me to take action with them after I join the union. Under such circumstances, you wouldn't stop me from going deep into the wasteland, right?" "Ahem, you're technically right, but you still need to place your own safety as your most important priority." "Then this is the reward I want," said Lorgar. "I'm sorry I rejected your kindness before." "Well, it's up to you." Roland laid out his hands and shrugged. "Now, do I need to sign a contract?" she asked with a solemn face. "Of course, Wendy will tell you everything later." Roland stood up. "I'll ask the kitchen to send you something to eat. Have a good rest first. You'll have many chances in the future to thank Nana and the other witches." Having seen Roland leave the room, Lorgar's ears drooped and she lay back down on the bed. There was one thing that she had kept a secret from Roland. It was the genuine reason why Lorgar finally decided to join the Witch Union. She had not been attracted by the free drinks and the gold royals. As a Majin, she was more convinced by facts than words. From the very beginning, she had doubted Roland's promise to the Majin people and had refused to trust a nobleman from a northern kingdom. She had believed that she would one day return to the Wild Flame clan and become Roland's enemy again when he ultimately betrayed the Majin. Besides, Roland's comments during their first meeting had indeed irritated her. She had never anticipated that he would show any concern for a divine lady of a Majin clan. Even though the conflict between the Majin people and the Northern King had already been resolved, her suspicion of him still remained. However, her opinion of him had begun to change. During the symbiosis period, the Witch Union kept telling her that she only needed to hold on a little longer to get Nana's treatment, since they had already sent a number of letters to appeal to Roland Wimbledon for help. Back then, she would never have expected that the Great Chief, busy recovering his territory, would send Miss Nana back from the northern region of Grey Castle only for her sake. In Lorgar's memory, it was an exceptionally long journey from Iron Sand City to the Endless Cape, and Roland's kingdom was several times larger than the southernmost region. Given that, she had suspected that it would take at least 1 or 2 months for Nana to return to Neverwinter. However, the Great Chief had sent Nana back in time. Surprisingly, despite being a healer of great importance to the army, she had turned out to be the first witch to be sent back from the north. With this in mind, Lorgar found that it was hard to doubt Roland's sincerity. Even Maggie had to fly for 3 days to take a round trip between the northern region and Neverwinter. If the Great Chief did tell her the truth, that meant Nana had come to her rescue the moment she had arrived at the city. Such kindness would make any warrior in the southernmost region willingly take an oath of allegiance to the Lord. Lorgar could hardly be regarded as a professional warrior, but she was a pure Majin. Faced with the facts, she wondered, why not believe in the great chief more? Roland left the bedroom and went downstairs to the reception hall on the first floor. The guards at the gate opened the door, and all the people inside the hall stood up simultaneously at the sight of the king. Before he arrived back at the western region, lightning had brought his convening order back to Neverwinter. He steadily stepped into the crowded hall while taking a glance at everyone assembled before him. There were more than 50 people here, including the city hall department heads, the commander of the garrison of the First Army, the representatives of the Witch Union and Sleeping Spell, the governor of the Longsong district, and the senior witches of Tequila. They wore various kinds of facial expressions. Some seemed to be bewildered by the unknown enemy and some showed unmasked hatred towards the demons, while most of them looked solemn and serious. The war was close at hand, no matter whether they were prepared or not. Chapter 920, The War Plan. After Roland took a seat, the people in the hall bowed before sitting down. Under his leadership, the small and remote border town had rapidly developed into a major city. Roland could clearly see that he had become a spiritual leader in the eyes of the conference participants. He had never felt anything like this when he had given lectures to students at a primary school or when he explained his designs to his clients. All the people who attended this meeting were not only listening but also preparing. They were always ready to execute his plans and orders. He had a sense of achievement from seeing his administration bear fruit. 3 years ago, only a few people in the castle had served him wholeheartedly whilst all the local nobles had ridiculed him. Now, however, he had a splendid team to assist him. He went straight to the point. Neverwinter can't allow demons to take root on the fertile plains, especially somewhere so close to our border. Although the enemy came a little earlier than expected, we've also made rapid progress recently. We've recovered the lost regions and can now focus on fighting the demons. He paused to glance around and said word by word. Our next goal is driving the demons out of the Tequila ruins. We must do our utmost to achieve this goal. Do you have any questions? No, Your Majesty. Everyone responded in unison. Even Berev, who usually preached against wars, did not raise any objection since he was aware of the fact that most refugees came to the western region for the good order, capable king and safe environment. If the demons set up a base at Tequila and then kept harassing Neverwinter, the people would be terrified and even flee the city. Without enough population, City Hall could no longer sustain the development of Neverwinter. He learned this lesson from the decline of the eastern and southern regions. So let's talk about our war plan and policies now. Any department can share their ideas. Your Majesty, I think the top priority is relocating the industries in the north of the city as soon as possible. Berev was the first one to stand up and reply. The people outside the city wall are the ones most vulnerable in the face of the demon invaders. Even when we finish constructing the new wall to protect the people, the flocks of sheep and herds of cattle will still hinder our troop deployment in the north. It's just like what happened when the whole city was placed under the strictest martial law. He paused to eye Wendy. Due to the alert, the city gates remained closed, which blocked the transportation of wheat seeds and forest resources. Fortunately, City Hall had done everything in its power to minimize the impact. Roland had already learned this from the previous reports. As Berev mentioned it again, he could not help looking at Wendy. Surprisingly, she seemed peaceful and undisturbed. He thought she must have meant it when she said that she would take full responsibility. Not everything in the north can be relocated. We can use paddle steamers to carry wheat seeds, mushrooms, and other resources into the city via the Redwater River. However, we can't move the North Slope mine to another place. Additionally, it'll cost us a lot to rebuild the furnace area. Roland decided after a moment of pondering. We should increase our vigilance over the mine region so that we'll be able to fight back when the devil beasts attack. As for the alert, I need to elaborate on this issue. When the city is under martial law, we need to evacuate the idle personnel on the streets and in the market, but all the factories must resume production and keep working from today onward until I give a new order. I see. I'll make a list of the properties and business we can relocate, and report back to you. Berev immediately changed his tone since he realized that Roland did not want to place blame on Wendy. By the way, please include land use planning in your report. Roland knocked on the map behind him. Now that the threat in the Great Snow Mountain has been ruled out, all the area in the west can be used. With the help of Leaf, Misty Forest can serve as a natural barrier protecting our left flank. On the map, the barbarian land could be divided into 3 parts. From left to right, they were Misty Forest, Neverwinter Grassland, and the Impassable Mountain Range. Misty Forest looked like an inverted triangle, occupying almost half of the barbarian land with its vertex located at the Snow Mountain of the western region. The Redwater River that originated in the mountain and flowed through the border area of Neverwinter could be considered one side of the triangle, whilst another side started from the vertex and headed to the Dragon's Pine Mountains in the north. This triangle formed a large buffer zone for the city. At present, Leaf could cover the entire western section of the Redwater River and thus provided a safety net for the concrete boat platoons to transport coal and forest resources back to the city. Aware of the situation there, Berev readily accepted Roland's request. Yes, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, I think we need to tell the public about the demon's origin as soon as possible, Wendy said. Otherwise, our people will easily get panicked when seeing them suddenly. As you usually say, propaganda job is the most vital part of our administration. If we don't work to control the public opinion, some evil-minded people may take advantage of the people's fear. I agree, Aletheia, who appeared on the light curtain, added. Although common people have limited personal ability, together they can form a noteworthy strength. Fear resembles a whip. Most of the time, it's daunting, but it can also be used as a driving force for us if we handle it properly. The early appearance of the demons disrupted Roland's original propaganda plan, which was scheduled for after the unification of Grey Castle and his enthronization ceremony. He thus chose to leave this problem to Berev. You decide the content and the propaganda means by yourself. Remember to make sure that all the subjects understand that demons are enemies of the whole humanity and that we'll fight against them till death. Meanwhile, you should emphasize that in the face of guns and cannons, demons are nothing different from demonic beasts, no matter how hideous they look. As for the rumor-mongers and troublemakers, Roland sneered and looked at the 2 police chiefs, Vader and Renee Med. I think I don't need to tell you what to do with them. They hastened to nod. Of course, Your Majesty. Once Neverwinter finished discussing the wartime order and the related policies, Pasha raised a question which was likewise the greatest concern for everyone. How are you going to attack the demons near the Tequila ruins? The safest way is to set up artillery positions near it to destroy the demons' red mist supply equipment. Roland measured roughly on the map with his fingers. Now our Longsong cannon can hit targets 10 kilometers away. After some adjustment, it'll shoot even farther. Without red mist, the demons in the ruins will quickly die. Roland did not brag about his weapons at all. Considering the operational convenience and the limited transportation capacity, he had not adopted 152mm caliber for the first-generation Longsong cannons. As a result, they could not match an ideal cannon whose caliber was 152mm in many respects. However, he was able to quickly convert them by enlarging their chambers and using separate loading ammunition instead of fixed ammunition. By doing so, their range would be remarkably increased even if the other parts of the cannons, such as the barrels and wheels, remained unchanged. Got it. Your Majesty, the Tequila witches are willing to fight this battle for you. Tequila survivors were undoubtedly the most aggressive ones in the Battle of Divine Will. They would take the lead without any hesitation when combating demons. But, I still need to solve a few key problems to implement that plan. Roland shook his head. Without adequate preparation, it's hard for us to gain a foothold when faced with an attack from the demons. He retracted his hand and flicked his finger at the spot of the North Slope mine. The first issue is how to solve the transportation problem.